Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Oklahoma City Planning Commission. Before we begin, I'm just going to go over just a couple of housekeeping items. First, if you are wishing to speak to the Planning Commission regarding one of the items on the agenda and you are not an applicant, please make sure you complete one of these forms. These forms are located on the desk just outside of the chambers, and you can give it to one of the staff members who are right up here, and they're happy to help you. Please make sure that you limit your comments to 5 minutes. And if you and your neighbors are here, please make sure that you avoid any the repetitious comments. So if you want to just have one neighbor speak on behalf of all the concerns that the neighbors share, that is certainly preferred. And I think it's also important, though, that if everyone wants to make their voice heard, again, make sure you're making additional comments. We don't need to hear the same comments. So if your neighbor is concerned about drainage, which I know we're going to hear about on multiple cases today, then please make sure you address a different issue so that we can make sure we've heard all of the concerns that neighbors have. Please take this moment to silence your cell phones at this time. And finally, I'll just say that we follow the golden rule at the Planning Commission. We do ask that you treat each other with respect, the applicants with respect, and the process with respect today. So with that being said, we'll move forward with our agenda and to the receipt of the minutes from the previous meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to receive the minutes from the June 13th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting.
Commissioner Clare moves to receive the minutes from the June 13th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. That motion is seconded by Commissioner Govine. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. We are now in line for continuance requests, and we'll begin with uncontested requests.
Item 20, KC 7667, request to defer to July 25th. Item 21, case PUD 2003, request to defer to July 25th. And item 22, PUD 2006, deferred to July 25th.
Is there anyone here wishing to be heard on any of those items? Okay, we're just looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the uncontested continuance requests as read.
Commissioner Clare moves to approve the uncontested continuance requests as read. That motion is seconded by Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. We're in line for new requests.
Item 18, case CPA 2024-4, deferred to July 25th. And item 19, PUD 2014, also deferred to July 25th.
And I believe there was a discussion about whether to move the continuance to the following meeting of the Planning Commission because Commissioner Meek will not be present. Is there any objection from the applicant to moving to the first meeting in August?
I don't know.
We can leave it on.
I don't have authority to, can we just keep it moved to the 25th for now? My client's out of town at the moment.
Okay.
When he gets back in town, I'll get that answered.
Cool. I'm good with that unless commissioners have other thoughts. We're just looking for a motion.
Move to approve the new continuance request as read.
Commissioner Clare moves to approve the new continuance request as read. That motion is seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. And we are now in line for the consent docket.
We just have one item on the consent docket. Item 1, case C7664, final plat of Kimmel Addition, located south of West Hefner Road and east of Northwestern Avenue.
And there is no one currently signed up to speak on item 1, so I think we're just looking for a motion.
I'm representing the applicant.
So you're in support?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if I needed to speak, that's fine.
I think we're about to approve it.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the consent docket.
Commissioner Clare moves to approve the consent docket. The motion is seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. You're all good. You didn't even have to speak today. Perfect. All right, we're in line for items requiring separate vote. My understanding is that there is a significant traffic jam on I-40, which has delayed some commissioners and some applicants. So in light of that, we're going to have to keep We're going to do our best to try to work through the agenda as people are able to arrive here. So I believe we do not have applicants present for 2. We do have for 2. Okay, excellent. So we'll go with the reading of 2.
Item 2 is case C 7665, preliminary plat of Bellagio, located north of Southwest 29th Street and west of South Mustang Road, and a variance to section 5.3.1.d.5 of the subdivision regulations.
Excellent.
Hello, I'm Christian Hagan with Crafton Toll, 300 Point Parkway, and I'm here to represent my client in this subdivision. I think the one issue is requesting the variance for the connection off of Southwest 29th Terrace to that cul-de-sac that we have at the beginning of the drive. Those 8 lots at the front are commercial, and there's a couple factors. One is that the streets don't physically line up perfectly, and then also we thought to avoid having residential traffic going through that commercial site. So we'd like to request a variance on that.
And this is on the east side you're talking about, right? West side. Okay,
Southwest
sorry.
corner.
Okay, that makes sense. Commissioner Meek, this is in your ward.
Thanks, Chairman. I've reviewed this, and it looks to conform with the PUD, and I don't have any issue with the variance on that stub street into commercial. I agree. That would be right.
And it is worth noting that there is still a western connection. It's just not at that particular street stub, so
Yes, sir. Unless, do we have anyone signed up to speak?
we do not.
Okay, unless any other commissioners have any comments, I'm prepared to move to approve the variance of 5.3.1.d.5 on C7665.
And the motion is, and of course I do not have it in front of me, the motion is to approve the variance to section 5.3.1.d.5 of the subdivision regulations for C7665. The motion's been seconded by Commissioner Clare. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Commissioner Meek.
Yes, and so then with that being done, I would move to approve C7665.
Commissioner Meek moves to approve of C7665. The motion seconded by Commissioner Clare. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. We're now in line for item 4.
Item 3.
3, sorry. I'm one.
That's one day.
Is that one of the ones skipped? Sorry, I jumped.
Oh, it's the same applicant. Okay.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah.
Item 4 is case PUD 1382-SP04, application for a specific plan pursuant to the approval of PUD 1832 located at 16400 Ironstone Place.
Question?
Oh, sorry. I thought I was doing 3.
Okay.
Item 3, C7666, final plat of Bellagio, being located north of Southwest 29th Street and west of South Mustang Road.
I'm the one who started it by being confused about what item we were on, so I apologize already. Is this the same application exactly?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, anything to add?
I don't have anything to add.
Wonderful. Commissioner Meek?
Okay. Yes, I will recommend approval of the final plat of C7666 with TEs as listed.
Commissioner Meek moves to approve of C7666.
And
The motion's been seconded by Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Thank you. Thank you. We're now actually in line for item 4, and I can
Now
call the
item
right thing. I apologize.
Item 4 is PUD 1382-SP04, application for a specific plan pursuant to the approval of PUD 1382 located at 16400 Ironstone Place.
Is there an applicant present for item 4? Please come on up.
Hi Hi there. So we are just building a new Sherwin-Williams and looking to get our site-specific plan approved.
Excellent. This is in Ward 8. Commissioner Noble.
You want to state your name for the
Oh,
record?
yes, sorry. My name is Maria Spadassini.
I reviewed the specific plan. It's consistent with PUD, the master design statement. I saw nothing, no problems with it.
Okay.
So, no one signed up to speak.
No one signed up to speak for item 4.
Any other commissioners have anything? New Sherman-Williams building, so. With that, I'd like to recommend approval of PUD 1382 SB 04.
Excellent. Commissioner Noble moves to approve of the specific plan number 4 for PUD 1382. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're in line for item 5.
This is PUD 1486-SP05, application for a specific plan pursuant to the approval of PUD 1486, located at 2600 General Pershing Boulevard.
Excellent. Is there an applicant present for item 5? Otherwise, we'll just move it back in the agenda. Okay, we'll keep on going. No, there's a traffic jam here. Oh, here he is. Okay. Come right up.
I'm Larry Wallace with Newman. We're the owner's rep for Aztec Charter School. Back on May 9th, the Planning Commission had approved a specific plan that we had, and we had to switch gears based on timing issues. And so instead of having the 13 8-foot by 20-foot storm shelters, we've changed the plan, requesting to change the plan to go with up to 7 that are 8-foot by 20-foot. So that's it.
Okay. And I believe that this is in Ward 6. Commissioner Govine.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I reviewed the application. Yeah, it's a minor change to what we've already approved for storm shelters for Aztec Charter School. I don't see any issues with compatibility. Staff did not either. So I would, assuming there's no one signed up to speak, I will move to recommend approval of PUD 1486 SP 05.
Commissioner Govine moves to approve of the specific plan number 5 for PUD 1486. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Noble. Please cast your votes. Has everyone voted? Excellent. The motion passes.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We're in line for item 6.
Item 6 is KC 7668,
This is the
preliminary.
one we need to wait on. I think
we're
we need to wait
waiting
on this one. Okay. We'll go to number 7.
Item 7 is case PC 10931, application to rezone 12143 West Hefner Road from AA to R1.
Excellent. And we will get, I know there is a protester for item 6. We will get to it. The applicant is not here, so we will come back to it. Please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Dwight Butler with the Cowan Group Engineering for the applicant. We have no TEs and the staff recommends approval. I would respectfully request approval of the project.
Excellent. This is in Ward 1. Commissioner Claire.
No comment? No concerns? So I was just ready to make a motion if there's no one signed up to speak.
There is no one signed up to speak for item 7.
All right. I'll move to recommend approval of item PC 10931.
Excellent. The motion is to recommend approval of PC 10931 to City Council. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're in line for item 8.
Item 8 is case PC 10935, application to rezone 3301 Northeast 11th Street from R1 to R2.
Thank you. Is there an applicant present? We're looking for the applicant. Okay.
Hello, how's it going? Isaac Porras with Relic Ventures. Here for 3301 Northeast 11th to rezone from R1 to R2.
Excellent. I do want to say that this is in my ward. I've met with the applicant briefly on the phone and then met with the neighborhood association leadership several times. We did take a continuance at the previous planning commission meeting so that there was an opportunity for the applicant to visit with neighbors. I understand that they did have that meeting and that the neighbors are at least pleased. I think the head nod is encouraging. And I understand that you also shared with them some blueprints and other plans.
Right.
Not yet? Okay.
Oh, well,
Okay. So I appreciate the effort, appreciate the time, you taking the time to visit with neighbors. I do know we have one of our neighborhood leaders signed up to speak, so we're certainly happy to hear from her, but appreciate it. Any questions for the applicant? Okay, we're going to hear from our neighbor. Bobby Thomas, you have 5 minutes to address the Planning Commission. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Bobby Thomas. I'm the Assistant Treasurer from Garden Neighborhood Association. And Mr. Porras and I, we got along fine until I asked him to see the floor plans for his duplex. I agree with the plans. I know that it's going to be a, we're going to go with a, let me see, where am I at? I don't even see it now, but anyway, we're gonna go with him for R2, from R1 to R2. And we don't have any problems with that. The only problem we have is I don't understand his floor plans. He would not let me see his floor plans, even though the duplexes are identical. But I could not understand on my paper what it looked like. So if I could see the floor plans, I will agree even more.
Okay. Well, it's worth, Bobby, one of the things about this rezoning request is it's a straight rezoning request. So regardless of what the applicant wants to do, if we were to approve of this application, there's specific standards of where the building can be located and its proximity to the nearby building. So if staff wouldn't mind, if someone from staff could share with us what those parameters would have to look like based on this being R2 next to R1. So I'm wondering like what the setbacks would be required to be from the side streets or from the backyard, lot coverage, those kinds of things. Because that's the only thing we can require, Bobby. We can't require him to follow a certain, other than these guidelines that Sarah's about to mention, those are the only things we can require of him.
Okay, we do know that the lot size is 45 by 80. So it's gonna be a narrow, the front of it is narrow, but it goes deep. It's kind of rectangular. We don't have a problem with that. It's gonna be a small yard. The backyard is gonna be 24 square feet, and it will have a 8 by 8 slab in the back, which is fine with us. We don't have any problems with anything, except I wanted to see the floor plans, and now that I see them, I'm good with everything.
Well, that's just an overview of the lot, but Sarah's gonna tell us exactly what the guidelines they'd have to follow.
Sure. Hi, Sarah Welch, Planning Department. So the R2 is actually, has the same bulk standards as the R1. So the minimum lot width, I worried for just a minute, but I'm checking the survey, and they do have at least 50 feet. So you have to have at least 50 feet. You have to have at least 6,000 square feet. Your lot size does. Your setbacks are typically 25 foot in the front, 5 on the sides, and 10 in the rear. Although on the exhibit in your packet that was submitted by the applicant, this plat has a 50-foot building line. So that would be the only difference from our existing zoning regulations.
But they have to, even though it's a duplex, they have to follow the same standards as a single-family home. So it can only take up the same amount of space on the lot. It has to be the same distances that any single-family home has to be from each other, from the lots that are next door.
Okay, and also R2 is a medium-low density resident. That's what I wanted to let you know. Density resident, and that it can only have so many houses. Well, he can only have one duplex because it's such a narrow property. So if you're saying it's got to be so many feet on one side, on the other side, and in the front, How do we know what that is?
Staff knows what that is, and before they can build anything, it has to meet that standard. But it has to be the same as your
Okay.
single-family houses that are already on the street.
Okay, so now that's on Isaac, he has to do that.
Yep,
Even,
but-
now we've applied, we've said R2 is fine with us, rezone it to R2, that's fine.
And now we're going to make, the planning commission will presumably make a recommendation to say, yes, we support that. And then council has to make the final decision. So in 6 weeks, the city council is going to take the final vote to decide whether or not the R2 is allowed.
If he has the correct measurements on each side, right?
Well, they're going to allow him to be able to do that, and then he'll be forced, if it's approved, he'll be forced to meet those standards
Get
as
his
far
building
as
permits.
the distance from,
What if he can't?
then he won't be able to build.
Mr. Chairman, I might just say, it is not unusual that at the stage where you are approving zoning, that a developer might not have floor plans completed yet. Zoning is kind of a preliminary thing in the development process, even though it's the point at which the public gets to engage most. If it's approved, then those standards will stay in place. He won't be able to get a building permit that doesn't match those requirements.
Okay, thank you.
But the city enforces that, so it's not
The
just on
city
him.
does.
The city enforces that.
Okay, so we're through, even though we've said R2, he still may not get it?
Yeah, he still may not get it. It's up to the city
Because of
council.
the measurements on each side of the building, of the
Not,
duplex?
not for that reason. That's going to be a completely separate process. So there's one, this process is just about whether or not he has the right to be able to build a duplex.
Oh.
The next set of process that he'll have to follow through with the city inspectors is to get a building permit to actually create the duplex itself. And at that point, the city will ensure that he follows the same bulk standards that your single-family house, it can take up the same space, it has to have the same distance from the neighboring homes, it has to have the same setbacks.
Okay, so even though the neighbors be R1, he's gonna be the only one that's R2?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from, there's no one else signed up to speak. Any other questions, comments from commissioners? If I could make the motion to approve, I would.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to recommend approval, City Council, of item PC 10935.
Commissioner Clare moves to recommend to City Council approval of PC 10935. The motion's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Again, thank you so much to our applicant and to our neighbors. Really appreciate it. We're in line for item 9.
Item 9 is case PC 10940, application to rezone 1500 Northeast 25th Street from R1 and HNO to R3 and HNO.
Excellent.
Hello, I'm Aisha Brown, and I'm from Fine Rentals for You LLC. And my request is to go from an R1 to an R3. The property is currently a vacant lot.
Excellent. This is in my ward. It is in an area that is continuing to see a lot more development, housing development. Commissioners, you may recall that not far from here on the north side, on 30th, we just approved several homes, a new addition being built there. I believe we also approved some apartments not far from there, but this is definitely an area that's seeing a lot more reinvestment. This is also a neighborhood that is a participant in the Strong Neighborhood Initiative as well. There is definitely a great need for more availability of housing in Ward 7, particularly in this neighborhood, and so I'm definitely in support. I would encourage the applicant, if you have not already visited with Councilwoman Nice, I would strongly recommend that you do.
Okay.
So, there is no one signed up to speak. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to recommend approval of item PC 10940.
Commissioner Clare moves to recommend to City Council approval of PC 10940. The motion's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Good luck.
Thank you. All right.
We're in line for item 10.
Item 10 is case at PUD 2020, application to rezone 2811 Southeast 29th Street from R1 and PUD 1667 to PUD 2020.
Commissioner, I'm John Gary with the Oklahoma City Animal Welfare. I'm the superintendent. Really, in 2018, we were rezoned, and whenever they did that, they did not include the back part of our property. We're going to be building the new MAPS 4 shelter on that same property that's going to be in that area. So really, we're just asking to include the rest of our property in the rezoning that we did in 2018.
Gotcha. Makes sense to me. This is in Ward 4, Commissioner Privet?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to this one. I think pretty cut and dry.
It is, and we have no one signed up to speak.
I wouldn't suppose so. I will move approval of PUD 1669. Or 2020, sorry, 1669 is the old one. Sitting here looking at it.
It's okay. Commissioner Privet moves to recommend to City Council approval of PUD 2020.
Button.
And the motion's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Thank you. We're in line for item 11.
Item 11 is PUD 2013 application to rezone 11800 Southwest 29th Street from PUD 1782.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Here on behalf of the applicant. My engineer is here. He made it, despite the troubles on I-40. So this is an application that is right next to one that you just saw and ultimately went to City Council, got approved. The PUD 1970 came through a few months ago. That was seeking 30-foot lots. What we're seeking through this PUD is a 40-foot lot product. So larger than that. There is only one TE, and it's a new TE that I have not seen that is requesting that no structure or impervious paving shall be located within 100 feet of the floodway. So we cannot agree to that. But what we can agree to is that we will comply with all rules, state, local, federal, that exist and that are codified. So we will work with Public Works as we develop this, and we'll adhere to all the policies that they have in place. I think that is what's fair for the development community to be able to follow, is the processes and procedures that have been codified and are able to be known at the time of acquisition of a development. So we would ask you strike TE1.
Okay. Commissioner Meek?
Yeah. Anyone signed up to speak?
Not on this item, no.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Do you mind if we bring Barry up? to
No,
speak
that'd be
about
great.
this?
We always love to hear from Barry. Barry Lodge from Public Works. Please come on up. Barry, would you mind explaining the TE first and then your thoughts about this development and this request to delete this TE?
Yep. Barry Lodge, Public Works. I think this TE, from our pre-meeting and some things that we discussed before, stems from a statement that's contained in the comprehensive plan about how to develop in the vicinity of floodplains, creeks, and that kind of area. With this layout, they've kept everything out of the floodplain, so they wouldn't have to get involved with FEMA with new flood studies and map revisions and that kind of thing. So from the Public Works engineering standpoint, we don't have any problem with waiving this TE. There's not going to be an engineering requirement that would stipulate that they keep all impervious paving and buildings 100 feet away from that floodplain. We don't have any requirements like that.
Okay. Any other questions for Barry?
I just have a comment. I am horrified to find myself agreeing with Mr. Box. I mean, I think you can't just sort of spring these things on applicants. If we have talked about the need to get more serious about our environmental controls and implementing those by actual policies and steps that are uniformly applied to applicants on cases. So if this was kind of a shot over our bow that this might be what this would look like, for instance, I'm great with that. I also agree that it's probably not really appropriate to apply it in this particular case. But I applaud staff for taking that shot across our bow, and I would like to encourage more discussion amongst us as commissioners and with staff about concrete ways that we can put a little more teeth in our environmental concerns and controls. That was a huge part of the plan when it was adopted. It was something that almost everybody, was in support of, that we needed to do those things. And it's only gotten, more important as time has gone by, so that's all.
And I also think it would be good to encourage council to take a position, too.
Absolutely. They may need that guidance from us.
Yeah.
Well, it's an honor to have you agree with me. I'm horrified to hear that the thought of agreeing with me brings horror to you, but I will take it either way.
I think I was nice when I met with him and said, unfortunately, I disagree. I agree with you, I think was what I said.
I agree with Commissioner Powers as well, and we discussed this a little bit, or I have discussed this a little. There's a number of different terms that are being used here. One is floodway, there's stream bank has been used, floodplain is being used. I agree that we just need clarity, and we need something that we can rely on that's consistent and development knows about it in the community. But can I ask you a question, Mr. Box? You have stayed out of, you've used a line here. What line are you guys using to get out of the flood issues?
Say that again?
What is the?
So this is the zoning, right? When we come and plat it, we'll be able to show you with more specificity as to exactly how we're accomplishing that. This is simply the zoning piece of it.
Okay, well, I mean, the enclave at Creekside Village, what is this drawing called? Well, Exhibit B, it shows a separation, so that's what you're proposing? You've used a line to stay off of
Kendall may be
waterway.
able to
What is that? What are you using?
You have X and you have AE.
Yeah, just explain what you know.
Sure. For the record, Kendall Dillon with Craft and Toll. We've stayed out of the floodplain.
Floodplain.
Completely, right.
Okay.
So we're not encroaching into the floodplain. Obviously, by that, we can't encroach into the floodway. It's just the separation issue is the problem. So, like I say, so that's the line that you're seeing that we're separated from is actually the floodplain, the 100-year floodplain.
I see, and it's a little more visible on this exhibit, which is bigger than what we have printed. So the floodway is identified, yeah, I see. So the hatch, the line hatched area, you don't want to be 100 feet from that. You just want to stay out of the designated floodplain, which is a FEMA-defined line.
Right, the floodway is within the floodplain, and we're staying outside of the floodplain.
Gotcha, yeah.
The distance, the separation is the problem, so.
Okay, understood. I just want to make sure a little more clear on what they know.
I have a question too, and you might help.
AE-related floodway on the middle.
Who maintains the banks of that creek?
It's all located in common areas, so it's the homeowners association.
So the homeowners association or the homeowner who lives right behind that property, as the bank erodes?
No, it's the comprehensive homeowners association, not the adjacent owners. It's all located within a common area.
Right.
And it's not just, it's the portion on the other side is part of the same HOA.
Okay. And when a homeowner purchases a house, how do they know that they're responsible for that property behind their house?
Well, they're not. It's the HOA, so it's a part of the Declaration of Covenants and Restrictions that obviously
in the
is
covenants
part
and
of-
restrictions.
It's in the covenants and restrictions, correct.
If you look at the county assessor in the end, that property will be owned by the homeowners association.
In the common area?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, their rear property line shown in there.
But when the bank erodes all the way up into the neighbor's actual property, they're responsible for whatever erosion causes there.
They're responsible for their property line. The HOA is
Right.
responsible for everything that is not individually owned lots.
Until it affects the individual lot.
Right.
I might just say your questions are not untoward. In the past, there's two things. In the past, when our first attempts, I guess, at trying to implement some policy with respect to the provisions of the plan had to do with defining a separation from the stream bed. And that proved problematic for all kinds of reasons that you can tell just by looking at these drawings. it meanders, it, you know, it doesn't really necessarily follow other things about the height and depth of, you know, the property around it and so on. It's just very problematic to try to define it by following something that might move too. So there's that. You know, as we're moving forward with this, we're going to have to come up with something that's a little bit more just, you know.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going, because a lot of times property owners don't know, the developers aren't doing anything to protect
So that's
the waterway.
a separate issue. And
Right.
We've had in the past some discussions with utilities and with Public Works about this issue. There are a lot of homeowners associations out there that own common area around creek beds.
We do.
That, especially over time, have kind of lost that mini institutional memory about the fact that they're responsible for it. City Hall gets regularly questions about, there's a tree down in the creek behind my house, you need to come get it. And it's like, well, that's not how that works, you know, and that's very often how people find out that that's not how that works. And so, I mean, there are some things that we probably need to talk about, think through in terms of how we do this, so. Because yes, it is private property that is owned by the association, and the upkeep is on them, but it's not something that necessarily everybody who buys a house is, you know, pouring over their restrictive covenants and making that connection, so.
The more we can put the public on notice, you know, that expectation, better. Any other comments from commissioners on item 11? I think we're looking for a motion.
I'm ready to make a motion to, Mr. Chairman, recommend approval of PUD 2013 with TE number 1 being stricken.
And the motion is to recommend to City Council approval of PUD 2013 with the removal of TE1. And the motion's been seconded by Commissioner Govine. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. We're now in line for item 12.
This is SPUD 1637, application to rezone 2312 Northwest 21st Street from R2.
Good afternoon, once again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. This application would allow the currently existing facilities to remain. It's zoned R2 despite having a quadplex and a duplex already on site. The only goal here is to put those in a position to where they're legal. My client bought this, and it was tripped, obviously, on the title report that there was a zoning issue, so he proceeded to close to come through and get a SPUD that would make it legal. So there are no TEs. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. This is in Ward 6. Commissioner Govine.
Thank you. Yeah, I've reviewed the case. I don't see any issues with it. They're trying to do the right thing. I think staff and the applicant have negotiated a good language to be included that you know, the project defaults to the base R2 standards if they were to demo any of the existing structures. So I am in support, and I'm open to other comments or questions.
And there's no one signed up to speak.
Okay, well, in that case, I will make a motion to recommend approval of SPUD 1637.
Commissioner Govine moves to recommend to City Council approval of SPUD 1637. That motion seconded by Commissioner Clare. Please cast your votes.
Thank you.
The motion passes. We're in line for item 13.
This is SPUD 1638, application to rezone 1621 North Ellison Avenue from R4 and Urban Conservation.
Hey, good afternoon. Adam Landman, 718 West Sheridan, here on behalf of the applicant. This is two sites. One's currently R4, the other one is R1. We're combining the two right now. I see staff has, we knew about some of these TEs. Some of them we just saw, but we don't have any problem with any of the three TEs that they've recommended for this. And otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the project.
This is in Ward 6. Commissioner Govine.
Thank you. Yeah, we've reviewed, I think the applicant has made a number of adjustments to be closer to sort of base standards, parking of 1.25 spaces per dwelling unit, 32 dwelling units maximum, 20% open space, which it looks like you're well over that as currently proposed. That would be your absolute minimum.
Yep.
And I think we clarified the Gatewood UCD boundary really was intended to not encompass this lot. It's intended to encompass the south side of 16th Street. It just happened to be drawn a few feet into this lot, so I'm disregarding that, and that will be adjusted as part of this SPUD if it is approved. So I don't have any other questions. If anyone has comments or people signed up to speak, please.
Would you, well, I think I just want to make sure, one of the things that Commissioner Govine and I did discuss was just, again, about that existing home. Maybe you might share with us the current condition of that home and why you decided it's better to go ahead and tear it down and do this.
Yeah, there's a garage apartment in the back that needs to be torn down. It's actually kind of tilted up. And the front house is fully gutted right now. It's just studs on the inside. The foundations are actually kind of wobbling quite a bit on that old thing. Exterior is in really bad disrepair, so we don't see a real good case for trying to save it.
I should have mentioned as well, too, we discussed that, and yeah, based on the fact that even if it were in the UCD regulations, there wouldn't be anything that we could do to prevent demolishing that house in the state it's in anyway, and there's nothing, they could do that today, right now, on their own, regardless, so I was okay with proceeding under those conditions.
Excellent. Any other questions from commissioners?
I see something detailed on the site plan as waste. I'm presuming that's a dumpster location?
Yeah, the site plan hasn't been updated, but that would be moved to the north side of the entry there, and so with better access for the trash truck. So we're spacing that out. I think the language now says 25 feet away from the residential border.
Okay. 25 feet from residential property boundary?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a weird, with that location. I know typically we try to get applicants to move 50 feet, have the dumpsters 50 feet from residential, but I know this site makes that really challenging, so. What do you think? Go ahead.
I have to say, not a
Please.
fan of tearing down viable residential housing to build other residential housing. But, I'll defer to you on the condition, and if you think it's not salvageable, then, I'll go with that. But this is not something that we want to get started. We're talking about, just learned a new phrase, NOAHs, naturally occurring affordable housing. And so I'm thinking about that a lot with respect to my own ward, and there's certainly a lot of it in Ward 6 as well, Ward 7 as well.
Oh, definitely.
So I don't want us to get started tearing down viable residential housing, albeit perhaps smaller than what could be done there if we employ, SPUD or whatever. So just my thoughts.
I think that's a very valid point, and that was discussed at length. I would be more conflicted were it not such a large lot and also close to other multifamily. It's 32 units versus just tearing one down to build 2 units. To me, the infill in this case, at least in my own opinion, the infill kind of trumped the existing historic resource in this case. But I absolutely agree that's something we should take very seriously. And not everyone will agree with me either. So.
Yeah. I think it's case by case, but I agree with you that in general, we want to preserve it. That's why I thought it was important that be added to the discussion, that Commissioner Govine and I at least did discuss that. Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Govine, then.
I will move to recommend approval of SPUD 1638.
Mr. Govine moves to recommend to City Council approval of SPUD 1638. That motion is seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Good luck.
Thank you.
We're in line for item 14.
Item 14 is SVUD 1639, application to rezone 14,000 Southwestern Avenue from AA.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. This application is for a modified commercial development. There are 2 TEs, both of which we would ask to strike. One of the TEs is the TE we just discussed at length in the previous rezoning case, dealing with 100 feet away from a floodway. The other one deals with the participant recreation outdoor being 150 feet away from residential district or use. So there is a single-family home to the south. As I guess luck would have it, I got a call from the individual that owns that house yesterday seeking to hire me to go rezone her side to commercial. I asked if the house was inhabited, and she said, other than snakes and raccoons, the answer is no. So the concern is not present based upon the long-term plans of the person that owns that structure that's uninhabited to the south. So we would ask to strike both TEs and then remove the language that's currently in the SPUD requiring that trees along the south 5 feet be retained.
Okay. This is in Ward 5. Commissioner Newman?
Do we have anyone signed up?
Nope.
Okay. Mr. Box and I called him yesterday and asked him if he'd spoken with a neighbor to the south, and he called me back and he called him to hire him. Having that conversation, I have not been able to talk with the person that owns the property to the south. Apparently they're a physician that's been hard to get a hold of. I had some conversation with Councilman Hinkle, and he and I are both comfortable with proceeding forward as Mr. Box has described, striking the 2 TEs and deleting the trees, contingent upon that we have some conversations before council with a property owner to the south to confirm that they are going to commercial property. And that really, to the east is a Orr family farm. Don't really have any concerns there. To the north is new commercial residential, and then to the west is a 4-lane street. So unless someone has an objection, I would like to make a motion to recommend approval of SPUD 1639, striking the 2 TEs and deleting the last sentence in section 7 of landscaping that says existing trees shall be preserved along the entirety of the southern property boundary of this PUD.
I'm going to trust you on the trees. I would typically say we should still require that we keep the trees without an understanding. We don't have an understanding of exactly what we're going to do to the site on the south. I'm assuming we're making the assumption that the plan is going to be that there is some connection between these, what will ultimately be 2 commercial properties.
Correct.
So we don't want the trees impeding our way of making that a...
The trees are mainly also grown up in the fence line, so it's my opinion that most of the trees are going to be removed if there's a fence line put in place anyhow.
Okay.
So.
I don't know.
Detention pond.
I mean, we're not saying that the trees will come down. We're just removing the prohibition. So perhaps trees will remain, but it allows for the ability to have cross-access between 2 commercial developments.
Can we use some language, and you can read it again, where haven't we said before, like, to the greatest, preserve to the greatest extent possible, or something like that, maybe? A little stronger?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
I'm looking at our resident landscape architect.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, I understand the need for cross-access easement. What I would hate to see is, I mean, if you see the exhibit, that much paving, that much, development, and then mirror that over, flip it, and, in an area that's been historically wooded, I don't see the issue to preserve those trees, but remove them where cross-access is needed. So remove pockets, but not just be able to have the ability to remove them all for the entire length of the property line.
And obviously, that wouldn't stop there being further. And obviously, I know what Mr. Box is about to say. We can go tear down the trees tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, is going to be his point. And I know that that is true. But it's still, it is still a value.
That's horrifying.
It's still within our purview to want there to be a greater preservation of the trees. And this certainly doesn't prohibit Mr. Box from being able to get this worked out differently with council when they make their final decision, but it's our recommendation. And so if our recommendation is try to preserve the trees, let's do it. Thoughts on that?
I mean, you can say to the greatest extent possible. Again, there's no permit required, but if it makes you feel good, then.
Yeah.
I've horrified the left side.
So maybe you can redeem yourself with this
I'm
side.
gonna work my way
Okay.
around the horseshoe today.
How about you add language that says, except where cross-access agreements are? Okay.
You think greatest extent possible?
Well, and part of that is the trees come up almost to the street in some areas, and I'm not so sure that we necessarily want to maintain those from visibility, people going down the street.
Oh.
Another thing is as it develops as a commercial property, they'll have a pretty heavy commercial landscape ordinance that will infill parking islands and landscape point requirements. And so I believe to properly turn a site like this into commercial, it may need a whole new grading plan that the tree language would kill that. This is just to the south of the MAPS Health Center, isn't
Wellness
it?
Center. Senior Center.
Senior Center. It's that they didn't have to do what we're talking about here.
Yeah, they've already got a detention pond plan, so
Yes.
there's probably some work.
So it sounds like it sounds like the consensus is, well, one, we already know that the applicant can tear down the trees if they want. The question is, you know, do we want to encourage the preservation of the trees? And it sounds like most of us do want some stronger language than what the amendment that Commissioner Newman initially read. Maybe, can you give us that TE one more time the way you had it?
Well, basically, I was going to strike that language. The
trees
language in there is existing trees, that was put in there is existing trees shall be preserved along the entirety of the southern border, their southern boundary of the PUD, which that was put in place because of the trees, of the residential to the south.
So maybe we could just say, amend that to say something, preserve them to the greatest extent possible in, what do you think, David? Preserve it to the greatest extent possible before he tries to tear them down. Right. Sounds like that might be the first thing they go do when they leave the planning commission meeting. But what do you think?
We can certainly add it in there. I don't have an objection to
Just
it.
add the language to the greatest extent possible.
Yep.
Subject to cross-access. I mean.
Is that good enough for the record? No?
No.
I'm looking at Sarah.
Yeah.
I would like to know what Ms. Welch wants to see here.
Oh, is it
Ms. Welch would like to see trees. I think our typical language, really regardless, I mean, I think to the greatest extent possible. If you say it's to allow also for cross-access, I think we would interpret that to say you're gonna retain those trees except for where there's a driveway.
Would it change your mind if all the trees were cedar trees?
Yes.
Most of those are cedar trees.
They are.
I mean, these aren't like beautiful oak.
It changes my mind.
Yeah, we're looking at them now. and
Okay, so now we're
So
anti-tree.
now we're back to where we originally were.
Mr. Claire is
All
no
right.
longer horrified.
I'm not.
But he didn't say you were totally redeemed, he just said he's not horrified.
Okay, so anti-tree.
I'll try to clarify that next time. I almost put in a different word, they were junk trees. I didn't want to use that word.
They always look better from above, though, don't they, on the satellite view?
So, are we good with what I originally proposed now?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
So,
and you made the motion.
yes, I did make
So
that.
Commissioner Newman has moved to recommend approval of SPUD 1639 to City Council, subject to the technical evaluation amendments that he read into the record, which included the removal of TEs 1 and 2 and the removal of the tree preservation requirement in the SPUD. The motion's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please please cast your votes. And the motion passes. We're now in line for item 15.
This is SPUD 1640, application to rezone 3009 Northwest 16th Street from R1.
Hi, I'm Brad Rice. I also have Gene Kitzmiller here. Gene is actually working directly with the owner as part ownership in this property, but it's for a dwelling unit, and just a couple months ago, you all passed a dwelling unit about 3 blocks to the east that I was part of directly, and it's kind of asking for the same thing here as a dwelling unit in the backyard.
Excellent. This is in Ward 2.
Yes, and we have met and discussed this, and
Is your mic on, Commissioner Powers? Want to make sure my wife can hear.
I think so.
Are we sure? It should be 6, I guess. Maybe it does
I'm
say.
sorry, I thought
I'm
we-
sorry.
I thought
No,
we'd
I
come
jumped
to
ahead.
mine.
Sorry, 6.
No, I thought we'd come
I
to
was
mine.
confused.
Nope, sorry.
I was confused
Once again.
looking at.
It's like,
Again,
no,
Ward
I've never
6,
met
sorry.
this person before.
That's
Sorry.
okay. Yes, so, yeah, look, we're, accessory dwelling units are a hot topic right now. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about them. I have a couple of comments on this case, but there may be other thoughts, and I know there is one letter that I have received. There may be more, but that's one that I'm aware of. So I'll give my thoughts on this in order for me to get to the point where I need to recommend approval. I would be wanting to require the sidewalks be constructed for the width of the lot, a new sidewalk, which would be in line with any new construction permit on a property that's in what's intensifying the use or adding a new home. And well, really, that was the only thing, but I just wanted to recognize that there is a protest, but I was going to ask to add a TE to require the sidewalks for the width of the lot. Other than that, I don't have an issue with the accessory dwelling unit. The only other, oh, sorry, I did have one other comment, is I wanted to add a TE that prohibited any new parking in front of the main house on Northwest 16th. You have options that you've shown on your potential site plan for parking that could be served.
I think the staff had already changed that recommendation, and that was taken out, I believe. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, and I don't, yeah, okay, I don't think it's, as long as that's tidy, and maybe we don't need the TE, because it's just.
It's already taken out
I
of
think
the
it's in
MDS.
the NDS, yeah, we asked that they take that out of in the
Okay,
NDS.
okay, so that's
Just
built in.
replacing that parking pavement with a sidewalk.
So those would be the two concerns that I wanted to raise and get your thoughts and any other thoughts.
I don't have any objections to any of that.
Okay.
I'm good with it.
So
we're just
so
looking for-
basically, parking in the front does not show up on this, which was already been agreed to with the staff.
Great.
And then it'd be a sidewalk, even though there's no other sidewalks along that street, there'll just be a sidewalk in front is what you're asking for.
Yes, I understand that.
Okay,
and-
that's what
and-
you're asking for, though, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
because, I don't want to provide, I wouldn't want to put a hardship on you, but it has to start somewhere. It's a policy in place. Other people do this, and that's how we get sidewalks done, and.
Sounds like he's in agreement, so.
Okay.
Go with that. So really, it's just that one requirement, right, with the sidewalk?
Yeah, so that would be the only added TE would be, or I think, we would just say sidewalks to be required for the width of the lot on Northwest 16th in line with city standards.
Yep.
So-
Yes.
Oh, sorry, there is TE1. Sorry, it's on the other page, that's why I missed it. This would be TE2. TE1 would be rooftop decks, patios, and balconies are prohibited. You're aware of that?
Yeah, I don't know if that was even the request, was it?
No, there wasn't any of those types of structures with the request.
You said rooftops, decks, and what?
So staff has recommended the following TE number 1, which is rooftop decks, patios, and balconies are prohibited.
Patio, meaning ground level patio?
Let's get a
This is news
ruling
to
on
us,
that.
so I wasn't sure.
Only rooftop.
Okay.
So do we need to change that language to say rooftop decks, rooftop patios, and balconies? Or,
I'm
excuse
just
me,
going to say, strike the
second
word
floor
patio, because that's
patios.
interpreted as on the ground in my vocabulary, but rooftop decks and balconies are prohibited, would be how I would read that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that wasn't discussed with the city, and then when the letter was going back and forth, that wasn't discussed, so. you're good with it, then roll with it.
So not trying to make this more complicated, are you saying rooftop decks and rooftop balconies? If you
Yes.
say rooftop decks and balconies, it's a little,
I agree, you're right, that's gray. I'm going to say it's rooftop on both.
Okay.
Because they're limited to 25 feet.
Yeah, you're just saying you can't walk around on top of the roof.
Yeah.
and just to be very clear, I'm sorry, are we saying that there won't be any parking front of the front building line or of the front line of the home or structure?
I'm
or-
saying front line of the main structure.
Well, no, what we're
setback.
saying is the staff has made a change that's in the MDS now, so can you clarify that, what the change was in the MDS?
Ben Davis, Planning Department. The MDS now states that there's no parking within the front yard, and it has to be behind the front building line.
Thank you.
The intent on the TE was to have nothing on the roof.
Okay.
Okay.
That was never,
I'll attempt those again when we get to that point in just one minute. I just did want to acknowledge if the person that submitted a letter is not here to speak for themselves, I just wanted to acknowledge that I did read that and I did consider it. It's not that it's being disregarded at all, but they mentioned adequate sewer and water, and just, being against it. So I'm still going to recommend approval. I just wanted to acknowledge that the letter was considered and not disregarded by any means.
Understandable. You want to go ahead and make the motion?
Okay, I will move to recommend approval of SPUD 1640, subject to TE number 1, rooftop decks and rooftop balconies are prohibited. And the addition of TE2, that sidewalk shall be constructed to city standards for the width of the lot along Northwest 16th Street.
Commissioner Govine moves to recommend approval of SPUD 1640 to City Council, subject to the amended technical evaluations as read into the record. That motion seconded by Commissioner Noble. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Thank you all so much. We're going to go back to item 6, since Mr. Grubb decided to join us today.
Item 6 is KC 7668, preliminary plat of Buffalo Farms Phase 2, located south of Southwest 29th Street and east of South County Line Road, and a variance request to the subdivision regulations.
Let me catch my breath. Mark Grubbs, 1800 South Sarah Road, on behalf of the application. I just ran from my car up here, by the way.
We would have waited.
I left my office 45 minutes before the meeting. Takes me 15 minutes usually, so.
Wow.
Evidently, there's a semi on fire, so.
Wow.
So what we have is a new preliminary plat that covers a portion of the original preliminary plat. Market demands have shown that they needed to move to a smaller lot than the original plat, which was 50-foot lots. These are 40-foot lots. We've maintained all of the requirements of the south boundary and the east boundary of the PUD. So the increase in over 10% lots in the overall addition is what brings us back. We agreed to all the TEs, and we need a variance on TE2. So TE3, if you look at along the north boundary, there's an east-west street. It's 32nd. TE3 is basically suggesting that carry across into that stub into the northeast property. We agree to that. So what TE2 does after that, there's about 35 lots on that single point of access after that stub. So there's basically 5 more lots than allowed on a single point of access after that stub. So we need the variance to exceed the number of lots there, so.
Gotcha. But you're good with 3?
I'm good with all the TEs, just need a variance on number 2 as suggested.
Any staff comments on that?
I actually discussed it. I had to clarify yesterday, so we've all discussed. I think we're all good.
Okay. Commissioner Meek.
Yes, in that pre-meeting, I discussed the same TEs. We don't have anyone signed up to speak, and with this. We do.
Oh, we do.
Okay.
We have one person signed up to speak.
And I will speak to that really quick. Mr. Kofed and I, who submitted the protest letter, we worked together quite extensively on the rezoning and the original preliminary plat. Because of that pond that's in the middle on the east boundary, they have a lot of drainage issues there. We've assured them that we would work with them. Once we got to that point and did our design, we would show them what we came up with, as well as bring utilities to certain areas on that east line. So we haven't changed our tune, and I called Mr. Kofed, discussed it with him. We still agree to all those things, and basically that's what I read in his letter. We still agree to do everything we said we were originally going to do. Yeah, we're just not that far south, so it'll take the addition a bit to get back there. So.
Okay, well, we're still going to hear from him. Gary Kofed. Please give us your name and address for the record. You have 5 minutes to address the commission.
Gary Kofed, 8425 Southwest 35th Street. First of all, I want to say it's good working with Mark. He does what he says, or he's done what he says. And I'm not here to say not in my backyard either. The big concern of the whole neighborhood, and we brought it up before, when the PUD was approved, the drainage and runoff is a very big concern. And I know I've talked to Mark with it in a preliminary type basis, but we really need to be assured that it's going to be taken care of, and that not only the drainage from the proposed development area, what impacts it the most is drainage from the Kingsridge West area, which runs into this, indirectly runs into it. It's nothing but incremental. And I think as far as the neighborhood goes, before anything is formally approved, I don't want to hold him up, but I want some assurances, would like to have some assurances that we're going to be protected. And secondly, part of that is, I think I'm the only one in the neighborhood that is on a water well, our only source of water. It's a very shallow water well. We abut up against the property line. And from what I've been told when working with a couple of conversations with the water folks, is that hydrologist, is, yeah, I've got some big concerns too, because it's so shallow, surface contamination and runoff, if the land is significantly altered, and plus just traffic, not knowing how the aquifer is actually mapped out, surface damage on a small well. Shallow well could damage it. So that's what I'm asking is can there be from the city, the neighborhood, and Mr. Grubbs' office, can we review all this to make sure that nobody's going to be adversely affected? That's all I have.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Kofed. I'll ask Barry Lodge to come grace us with his wisdom. And you might, and I know this will apply to other cases today, so you might talk about the process by which this review is done, the standard you follow, and then what happens if for whatever reason this construction does not solve all of the drainage issues.
I will do the best I can with that. Barry Lodge, Public Works. So the general process that we're going to follow, Mark and his group will prepare their final plat. I'm assuming it's going to come in several different phases. It's not going to be all this thing all at one time. They will submit their final plats and their construction plans to Public Works for review. We will be reviewing those plans and calculations for conformance to the current drainage ordinance. The thing that I can't say that we will make Mark do is to address issues that are occurring now. That goes beyond the jurisdiction that we have in Public Works to direct the developer and the engineer to address problems or to address the storm sewer runoff that isn't generated from their site. we cannot require them to do that. That may be an agreement that Mark and his developer want to make with the residents, but it would strictly be that. It would be an agreement between them, and it's not anything that we can enforce. All that we can enforce within the city is what is written within our drainage ordinance.
And the standard of review within the ordinance is what with regard to how you will?
So the standard of review in this, and this is in an area that currently doesn't fall within the city's detention required boundary. So they are not, for the residential development, our ordinance would not even require them to provide on-site storm sewer detention. That's some things we're looking to address, but at this point, even providing the on-site detention will be and I'll maybe use the term a little loosely, it's going to be a voluntary agreement that Mark and his developer will have with the adjacent property owners. What we're going to be looking at is, does it comply with the storm sewer design criteria that we have established? Now, if Mark does come in and say, yes, we're going to provide detention, then we will review that in accordance with the ordinance as well. So we're going to, if the detention is laid out on the plans as being provided, we will look at that. Does that detention comply with the ordinance?
I have a quick question for you, Mr. Lodge. How often is the detention boundaries updated with all the development and all the roofs and streets we have coming in this area? The upstream water coming into newer developments that are downstream, by ordinance, they're not supposed to calculate that. They're only calculating their impervious area and their water that leaves their property. But if there's already a drainage increase coming to them, how often could that detention boundary be updated for a ward that's growing like this one?
So it is not updated often enough, I will say that. But the thing that prompts the detention required boundary at this point to be updated is structural flooding. There may be flooding that occurs in the streets, it may get into yards, it might flood an intersection in locations, but what prompts that detention boundary is actually a structural flooding, that we've got water in a house. That would prompt us to update that boundary.
So it's complaint driven?
Yes.
Structural.
It's a little reactive when it comes to that, and again, we're working to get through some new drainage ordinance requirements, but that hadn't hit the books yet.
Okay.
Barry, is there any review from Public Works with regard to wells, to private wells, and how does that factor into your analysis whatsoever?
We do not have any criteria for reviewing that at all.
And then to our municipal counselor, is there any actionable action that we can take in this plating process to mitigate any issues, I guess, with regard to Mr. Kofed's personal well? As in, I guess, do we have any obligation legally to ensure that there's proper recharge? I think there was a memo about this not too long ago.
Yeah, so I think Mr. Lodge kind of put it pretty well. Your job on these plattings are you're looking for compliance with subdivision regulations, with the zoning regulations. That is what you are reviewing. If it meets it, you probably need to approve it. It's not the time to go, well, you know, this sounds like a good idea. Let's throw this at them. It needs to be, you are reviewing it. This is kind of a quasi-judicial atmosphere on these plat approvals. So you are reviewing it against the subdivision regulations, the zoning regulations. If it complies, you need to approve
And to the PUD.
That's right.
And to the PUD, yeah.
Yes, zoning ordinances, anything that would apply here. But if it meets those, that's what you're reviewing.
Okay.
If I may throw in one extra. if you look back, then the records would indicate detention is not required in this area, but we agreed to provide detention in the rezoning and preliminary plating phase of this project. We're already designing the area to the north. We've already have a detention pond designed for the area flowing to the north, and we've done preliminary design on this area that he's concerned with, and we're going to do, again, what we said we would do. So we're going above and beyond. We agreed to provide him easements and bring utilities to a certain area so that he could tap into that water system that we are extending in the future to take away any concerns that he had with his well as well.
Okay.
So.
Hope that helps, Mr. Kofed.
So, just to be very clear, Mr. Lodge, if Mr. Grubbs brings in a plan for detention and so on, the response of the city is not, well, that's not required, we're not reviewing that, we don't have anything to say about that. It is, you may not be required to do this, but since you're volunteering, we will check it according to all of our standards for the construction of such a thing.
Yes, that is correct. We will review it just as if it was within that detention required boundary.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we've dealt with the issue of the private wells and the impact several times. And I think when we had this discussion, that led to a memo that the municipal counselor's office provided to us, essentially saying, that we don't have a mechanism for enforcing this right to recharge the well, essentially, which I think is worthy of further consideration from the city council. And because this is a quasi-judicial process with regard to plats, as was outlined, we're required to follow what the standards are. If they're met, we are obligated to approve. So I just think it's important for you all to understand what we are obligated to do on the Planning Commission. So I would encourage you to certainly visit with your council person about these concerns as well. Commissioner Meek?
Yes, with that being said, and the conformance with the PUD and the changes being requested and the TEs, I would like to recommend to approve the preliminary plat C.
You gotta do the variance first.
I've got to do the variance first. Yeah, I would like to recommend approval to the variance of 5.2.8.A of the subdivision regulations.
Commissioner Meek moves to approve of the variance to section 5.2.8.A of the subdivision regulations. That motion seconded by Commissioner Newman. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Commissioner Meek.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Chairman. I'd like to move to approve C7668, the preliminary plat of Buffalo Farms with the TEs as read into the record and shown.
Commissioner Meek moves to approve of C7668, subject to the technical evaluations in the staff report. That motion seconded by Commissioner Clare. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. And we are now in line for item 16.
Item 16 is case SPUD 1642, application to rezone 4220 North Classen Boulevard from O2 and Classen Boulevard overlay to SPUD 1642 and Classen Boulevard overlay.
Afternoon, Rob Elliott, 900 Northwest 6th Street. I'm here on behalf of 88. They have proposing to change the zoning from O2 to a SPUD zoning to allow some additional units for this property. They don't have any plans to redevelop or develop new on the property right now. They have a pending building permit application for remodeling the interior.
Okay. This is in Ward 2. Commissioner
Yes.
Powers.
And I have talked to Mr. Elliott about this at some length, actually, before they even filed, I believe. And I'm glad to see this building being used for, something new. We are changing to an SPUD to allow the retail sales and service, because one time there was some thought that they might use at least a portion of the building for a pharmacy. And that's perfectly all right with me. But as I understand it, the use that they're contemplating now is more office.
Office, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And I'm glad to see this building being reutilized, so. Is there anyone here who's signed up to speak? I've not heard from anyone.
There's no one signed up to speak, but I do think it'd be good to hear from Barry Lodge about access points if, in the event of new construction. We had talked about it just a little bit, and I wanted him to share those thoughts.
In Berry Lodge, Public Works. Comment on here that we put into the staff report, I don't think materially changes anything that they're wanting to do on the site. It's just a clarification as far as the access points, that the way the PUD is written right now, it says that two access points will be allowed, one on 43rd Street and one on Classen. And I'd just like to get the language that we have in the staff report incorporated into the PUD that basically says that the two access points that are the shared access are the points that will be used. I'm not going to try to take one of them away, but just to clarify that they will use those two shared access points as those points. And I've got some language written in the staff report.
But you don't want them moved?
Yeah, they won't be moved. They'll stay, and I think that's their intent from the site plan. But as we know, this gets approved and then they sell the building and somebody else says, oh, I get to have two driveways, one more, and now we've got issues with driveway spacing. So that's really the only clarification on that, is that they would use those two existing shared access.
In the event of new construction. Is that what you're saying? Because it already does require those access points that are in the staff report.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay. So that's what we would need to create a TE that just said that, Barry? Is that what you're recommending?
Say that again.
We do have the requirement that there be one access drive from Classen, one from Northwest 43rd. You're saying just require those access points to remain if the site is basically reconstructed, if the building's, is that what we're saying?
No, actually, the language that I had written just with my comment that was in the staff report,
Okay.
it's on page 6 of the staff report, item number 11, it just says add to that section 1-.9. It says that the access, there'll be, in the PD, there'll be one on 43rd, one on Classen, and then I would just like to have added in there, access shall be via the existing shared drives onto Classen Boulevard and Northwest 43rd Street. If new drives are constructed for access, they'll be designed and constructed in accordance with the applicable requirements of the City of Oklahoma City that are in effect at the time of the construction.
Yeah, and not 43rd Street, I believe it's 42nd.
Oh, is it 42nd? Sorry.
It's written in the PUD as 43rd though, in some spaces, so somebody might want to look and edit that.
Does that make sense, Commissioner Powers? Are you good with that?
Oh, yes. I mean, they're not even sure they're going to use both of the access points, but yes, I'm very okay with that. Are you?
You're very good, sure.
Okay. We have no one signed up to speak. I think we're just ready for a motion.
Okay, I'm going to move approval of item number 16, SPUD 1642, with the addition of a TE that says, access shall be via the existing shared drives onto Classen Boulevard and Northwest 42nd Street. If new drives are constructed for access, what I would say is if the site is redeveloped, access points shall be designed and constructed in accordance with the applicable requirements of the City of Oklahoma City that are effective at the time of construction. No, that's not quite right.
Can you give it to us one more time?
I think access shall be via the existing shared drives onto Classen Boulevard and Northwest 42nd Street is really all it needs to say, period.
That's in there. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that's all it needs to say.
Okay. Yeah, that's in there. Okay.
42nd Street, it's 42nd Street. So, okay?
Okay. The motion is to recommend to City Council approval of SPUD 1642 and it sounds like with the additional language as read into the record, assuming we understand, staff is following what that language is, I think the conflict is some of us see it as written in the report already.
I'm struggling to figure out what the TE is, and I'm sorry to hold up the,
No, that's not a
the show
problem.
here.
I think the question is, there's language in the document, the MDS, that deals with the eventuality of possible redevelopment of the site. So I think there's existing access points there. They are on 42nd and Classen. I think what staff is just wanting to be assured of is that if the site is redeveloped, the access points are going to stay where they are now.
So I guess my question is on page 3 in the staff report, it's number 9, the access. One access drive from Classen Boulevard will be allowed and one access drive from Northwest. I guess we're saying that should be Northwest 42nd Street?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's
Will
just
be
a
allowed.
typo.
I
yeah.
wonder if you just modify number 9 at the end of that sentence to add, for instance, as presently existing or located where presently existing. Sarah, tell me what you're thinking, if that helps.
Sure, Sarah Welch, Planning Department. So we're thinking that the way this SPUD reads today is one access drive is allowed per frontage. We assume they're going to keep the existing drive. Should the site be redeveloped, they still can't have more than one drive per street frontage, and the location and the access and the offset would have to meet code. So they might be able to move the driveway, should the site be redeveloped, but they still have to meet any driveway separation requirements of the existing code at the time, and the separation from the intersection at the time.
But the SPUD already limits it to one on each street already.
That's how we interpret it.
Regardless of where it is. Yeah.
I think that I just want to be very careful in the way we craft this, because you may get into a situation where if it's not clear that they can relocate the driveway in the future, should that ever be a need, they will have to rezone. If we say you must keep these 2 drives, they will never be able to get a driveway permit for anywhere else on that frontage. So.
Okay, so in the event that the property is redeveloped, it has to meet code. That's what we
Yes,
want to say.
it does.
There still will only be 2 access points, and they'll have to meet code.
Yes.
Sarah's saying we don't need a TE.
Wouldn't that be the case anyway?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that Public Works is asking for that to be just certain, right? I don't want to answer for Barry or disagree with him. I understand what he's saying. Those existing drives count as your one per frontage.
Right.
We expect they're going to use them. If they ever want to relocate them, they must meet the standards in effect at the time of development. Public Works standards, code requirements.
And we feel the need to put that in here because they wouldn't otherwise need to?
I believe that will, not speaking for Barry, I think he'd feel a lot better if you would.
Okay. I don't have a problem with that. It
I
doesn't
think we
really
just need to make sure that we clarify the reading, because how would the access drives not have to follow? So yeah, I guess, so we're just saying, adopt number 11 on page 6 as a TE?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Except
Is
we're
that-
going to change it from 43rd
To
to 42nd.
42nd. Okay, okay. So we're clear now.
Okay. Do you want me to read it?
That would be great.
Okay, so we're moving approval. Item number 16, SPUD 1642, subject to TE that states, access shall be via the existing shared drives onto Classen Boulevard and Northwest 42nd Street. If new drives are constructed for access, they shall be designed and constructed in accordance with the applicable requirements, City of Oklahoma City, that are effective at the time of construction.
Excellent. Commissioner Powers moves to recommend to City Council approval of SPUD 1642 with the addition of a TE that was read into the record. That motion seconded by Commissioner Clare. Please cast your votes. I don't have the opportunity to vote at this point.
Waiting on some IT down there.
We going to voice vote?
We can do that if you want to give it one more try.
Mr. Elliott and I had been joking that this might be the fastest approval ever in the history of the Planning Commission, so. And I
Failed on
jinxed
that.
it. I jinxed it.
Okay, should we just go ahead and do a voice vote? Yeah, might as well. Okay, let's go ahead and do a voice vote for the record.
I'll second the motion.
So the motion was made by Commissioner Powers to recommend approval of SPUD 1642, subject to the technical evaluation that was read into the record. That motion has been seconded by Commissioner Clare. Commissioner Clare, how do you vote?
Yay.
Commissioner Powers?
Yay.
Commissioner Meek? Commissioner Privet?
Yay.
Commissioner Newman? Commissioner Govine?
Yay.
Commissioner Noble?
Yay.
And I vote yay as well. The motion passes unanimously. We're in line for item 17.
This is PUD 2018, application to rezone 3016 East Memorial Road from C3 and O2.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. What we seek to do today through this PUD is to allow an Atwoods to go into this vacant big box retail space. It is worth noting that today the site is zoned straight C3, which means there are no limitations. Whatever the maximum extent of development you could do under C3 is allowed. The only reason that we have to come before you is not to add a use unit. It is because of one provision in the conditions under the outdoor sales and display use unit. Specifically, the provision that says the sales and display area shall be located behind the front building setback line. And of course, we desire to have it in front of the front building, further away from the neighbors. So in our mind, we're actually providing a benefit in pushing it further away than what the code would require us to do now. Now you see the locations where we are proposing to have it. C is a fenced-in, screened yard where things will be stored. But again, everything we're seeking to do is allowed today, except we can't put outdoor sales in the locations that are marked as A on that plan before you. So there are no TEs. We did have a neighborhood meeting that Mr. Pennington was able to join. We talked about a lot of things. There are some current issues that the neighbors have, some of which deal with you can see kind of a rough outline of baseball fields. Those are going away. We confirmed that this week. There are perhaps some existing drainage. The former operator installed a series of sump pumps with pipes along that back property line. I shared with Commissioner Pennington, I believe Commissioner Noble drove it. There is a relatively new fence that already exists on that south property line. Some neighbors have gone ahead and installed an 8-foot fence on their side of it, but there is a 6-foot fence that runs the entire length of that property line. That is fairly new. It's in good shape. I drove it. I walked it. All of the slats are in place. So we're not seeking to change anything. If you look at historical photos, you can see that the homes that exist, that share that boundary with this site, actually were developed after that building was built. So the neighbors came to this building knowing full well it's zoned straight C3. In the past, it's been, I believe, a grocery store. It's been a series of other things. So we're simply adding this modification to allow for the items A to be located in front of the front building line, further away from the neighbors. What is this saying, Caitlin? We also need to add a TE because we are trying to clarify that under 9.13, we are adding an architectural element for the Atwoods kind of barn-looking sign that is consistent with all their products. And so that that addition does not qualify as a new structure that would trigger a bunch of other things. We're just adding an architectural element. I guess staff, out of abundance of caution, wants to make sure that the addition of the architectural element that is just that attached Atwood sign is not deemed a new structure. So there are no TEs. We would seek to add that one TE. I am happy to answer any questions. Again, the only thing we're doing is we're actually reducing some things. We're limiting sign height and some other things that could otherwise be much taller than what we're proposing. But it's what you see listed as A in front of that front building line. That is literally the only thing that is stopping us from just pulling a CO and moving forward.
Okay, David, could you talk about one of the things that was discussed in the meeting with neighbors, which I appreciate the neighborhood for organizing this. One issue that was discussed was lighting and what would be done differently about the lighting in the parking lot. And two, would you talk about amplified sound? I think we talked about music from the facility. If we could go ahead and just include in the PUD that will not have that.
Yeah, we can add a TE that there no exterior amplified sound
Okay.
will be allowed. That's fine.
That's much better.
As far as the lighting requirement, can you talk about that?
Yeah, so the lighting is going to be, what the code requires, that it's shielded and screened from view from the adjacent residential neighbors.
Okay. I know we're going to hear from our neighbors. We're going to hear about the screening between this building and the neighbors. I think we're also going to hear about some concerns about drainage as well. So maybe we should hear from the neighbors first, and then we'll get Barry the opportunity to come up and talk to us about those issues.
Can I ask first?
Please.
Will the area for outdoor storage be fenced at all?
So C will be screened. The other won't really be screened because that's going to be like seasonal things that you would go and buy, I think flowers or fertilizer. It's things that are available for sale, similar to like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, what you would see kind of in front of that front building line or in the parking lot.
So my specific question was not about screening, but fencing. Sometimes those areas are fenced, I guess, just for security.
Yeah, and they could
Sometimes
be.
they're not.
They won't be site-proofed if they are.
Okay.
Other than, I think C will be, because that is more of not a spot where customers would go. That would simply be long-term storage of various items.
Okay.
Okay, and I think it's worth it, and I would love it if staff would be the ones to verify the question that I'm about to ask. If we said no, if the Planning Commission today voted no, what would the developer be able to still build that hard surface parking lot on C? That is not contingent on our approval or disapproval of this application, correct?
Sarah Welch, Planning Department, yes. What they would not be able to do is place the outdoor storage out front, and they need a little bit of a height variance for the Atwoods.
Sign.
Yeah.
I guess on the very front of the building.
Yeah.
So as far as the new hard surface on C, it is not contingent on our approval or disapproval of this application. So
No,
if we were to recommend that we will not pass this, they
No,
could still seek to build that new hard surface that is listed as C in the exhibit.
No, in the C3 district, you're allowed to have outdoor sales and display under certain conditions, and one of them is it has to be behind the front building, building. So that would be allowed. C would.
Regardless of whether we approve this or
In the
not.
existing zoning, yes.
Okay,
So
just want to be clear.
it's D, the smaller part around C that's going to be hard surface, right?
It already is hard surface.
Okay, and so, yeah, it's not a big slab like C would look like, it's just fenced in.
He said D.
He did say
D or
D.
C. Ma'am,
Well, yeah, the D around the C, that's going to be the
C
hard.
is not currently hard surface.
Is it not going to be?
It will be.
Ah,
Yes.
okay.
But the point I'm making is, regardless of
Yeah,
this
they could do that
application,
anyways,
they
right.
can do that. So that's not at issue as a result of this application, because it can be done regardless.
Right.
It
Okay.
not only can be paved, it can be used for outdoor storage.
Absolutely. It can already be used for outdoor storage. Okay, just want to make sure that our neighbors are clear about what the applicant's current rights are.
It's a strange case, because again, the only thing we can't do is push the stuff further away from the neighbors.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Let's hear from our neighbors. First, we'll start with Mr. Martin Reynolds.
Commissioners, my name is Martin Reynolds. I'm the president of the Eagle Crest Neighborhood Association. The neighborhood was advised, everyone within 300 feet of the property line. We had a meeting. Commissioner Pennington came as an observer. The lawyer for the owner, realtor for the owner also came. Those who were concerned came, and at that meeting and subsequent conversations, there were 5 main items that we had that we were concerned about. which I will list here. First of all, as was mentioned, that one item about the additional merchandising in front of the building, the neighborhood has no qualms about. That's not an issue. One thing that has been a continual problem has been flooding or water flowing off of that property into the neighborhood's properties. I do not own a piece of property there. I'm just the association president, but I have heard about that. So with that additional item C, area C, the new hard surface and the fenced yard, we'd simply request that the appropriate civil engineering be done in terms of flood control to ensure that whatever water offlow of those areas, including what currently goes outside of the parking lot to the south of the building, is properly mitigated so that it no longer continues to be a problem for the homeowners. That is the first thing. The second thing is that for the item C, the new fenced area requests that the fencing be as high as is allowed by code and that it have an opaque covering so that whatever is stored inside is not visible to the homeowners. Third is that along the south side of the property line, that where the homeowners have fences there, that a fence to be placed of the maximum height allowed by code, also of a permanent as could be, a durable structure, something that wouldn't require continued maintenance by the owner of the property, be placed along the south side so as to help help mitigate the view of the retail property from the homeowners side. There also be a request to be from the slab that the fence area will go on, there'll be a 10-foot open area there as opposed to slab going all the way up to the fences, again, that being an issue of water mitigation. In addition, that in terms of the notion of more modern urban and city planning, that some kind of hopefully landscaping or softscaping or trees, if you could place along the south side of the property, for those homeowners not having again to view what is going on in the retail area, if that is at all possible. We would request that be done. And finally, as I think has been stated by Attorney Box, if those ball fields are going to go away, that is something that would be much appreciated. And that is all that I have.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. And thank you for hosting. It was great. It was a very organized meeting. Appreciate the opportunity to visit with neighbors and
thank you for your all.
appreciate your efforts. Okay, let's hear from Michael Rabb.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Rabb. I'm actually from Arkansas. I'm the Atwoods representative. We're the contractor. In order to answer some of the questions about the fencing and we call it the steel yard, but the area C that y'all were referencing, that'll actually be a wrought iron ornamental fence. It's actually kind of a new object that Atwoods wanted to do to kind of appease to be more aesthetically pleasing in this setting. We know the area is a lot more up and coming, and they want to keep it like I said, aesthetically pleasing. And the Atwoods front, I know you had the elevation for the front of Atwoods. So that actual barn front will be significantly less sloped than our typical barn front. We've actually lowered that profile quite a bit in order for the height requirement and to keep with the more lower profile of the area. But if there are any other questions from the neighbors or any of you guys, I'm here to happy to help answer those for the construction side. Not necessarily the site layout, but as far as the constructions and renovations.
Okay.
I have a quick one. That Atwoods barn front you're calling, that's just a parapet, correct?
Yes, the actual structure is already there. We're just going to be extending a portion of it and then adding a galvalume front, and then Atwood sign will be on that structure itself. So we're just basically renovating the structure that's already there, not adding anything new.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you for being here, and we may need some additional information, so you might not go far in case we need you to give that to Mr. Box. Next, we have Marty Sawyer.
Hi, Marty Sawyer. I live at 321 Talon Road, which is right behind the new D&Z. And so I know you've already heard the issues. but that field already floods, it has a sump pump in it, and if you put a piece of concrete on top of it, it's gonna flood more into our yards. That's the biggest concern we have, that, and we do not want to hear the building. We want a fence. We don't want to hear them on their loudspeakers. We don't want their lights, and those have already, you all said are going to be addressed. I'm curious to see what your water and drainage people have to say, because it is a problem. We know they didn't have to come because they could put all their decorations behind, closer to our houses. We understand that. It was made very clear to us that we were told that this was really kind of nice that we got to come. So it is our homes and it is our property, and we do value that greatly. And, you know, we want to be good neighbors, but we also need to know that they're just not going to come in, and we know that we've seen Atwood stores, we know what happens and we know what they're telling you, but we also know what happens behind their buildings, which is where our homes are, okay? And so whatever, you know, is behind that building does affect our homes, okay? It's not just a little lot, it's trash, it's, you know, stuff they're storing that they can't fit in the fenced yard and things like that. And so that is a concern for us. And we just don't want to look at it, to be honest.
Okay, would you mind explaining for commissioners, and I did, the applicant did send me photos of the fence line that is south of the Atwoods building, which I believe you live, again, directly south. Would you mind explaining to commissioners, because this is going to be the topic of discussion once we've heard from everyone,
Right.
why is the existing site-proof 6-foot fence insufficient?
Well, the 6-foot fence is not side foot, it's chain link, first off. We own the current fence. We property owners own that fence. It doesn't belong to the people that are building or Atwoods or whoever owns that building. That's our fence. We own it and we put it up. Yeah, we did.
So but I guess what we're wondering, because that's usually what we require
Yeah.
of applicants, is if we're concerned about screening,
Yeah.
it's a standard thing for us to do is say, okay, we'll then build a 6 to 8 foot wooden fence.
Right.
So when there's already an existing fence,
That's what
we
they have.
usually don't require them to
That
build
is
an
a- but
additional
that
fence.
belongs-
And so that's why I'm wanting to
Some
understand.
fence is brand new, some fence is not, because
Okay.
it's all done by the homeowners. So some homeowners have put in their own 8-foot fence because of the ball field that was put in that changed the drainage again on our property that didn't have to come up in front of you all. And so some of us have done that ourselves. We have put in those fences, but that's our fence.
And so what you're wanting is an additional fence
Yes,
to that fence?
yes.
Okay. Okay.
So we want an additional stockade barrier, not, you know, where we're not seeing the back of that building or the back of the fenced yard or whatever is going to be on that property, because they're taking all the property that's there. So we want to not see it.
Okay, but just so that I'm clear, because again, this is you're gonna
Yeah.
be sitting back in your seat and you're gonna see us having this discussion that you won't be able to rejoin. So that building already existed.
Yes, it did.
They're not asking for any new use of that building.
We understand that.
They are not changing anything about that building,
But this.
except
they're
on the
asking
other
for-
side that's opposite of you.
Right, but they're asking for a planning change, so if we're gonna make a planning change that's gonna live with the property, as we were informed, that's what would happen today. If you all agreed to that, this would be what would live with the property going forward. Then that is what the homeowners want. Because if we're going to make this change from a C3 to whatever you all call it, a PDU, whatever-
PUD. Yeah.
PUD, whatever y'all call that. If you're gonna make that change, then this is one of the changes that we, as the homeowners who live in that addition, want to see. Okay?
Okay. Okay. Any questions from commissioners?
I do have just a quick question, just because I haven't had the opportunity to go out there. Do your homes generally sit at the level of the lot behind you? Are they below, above?
This property sits below, above ours a little bit. So currently now, how it is, there's a street that runs through the middle of that property, that makes those two buildings connect. And it floods through our fences into our property lines.
So they don't have a curb on the edge
They
of it?
do,
There's
behind,
not-
behind the Atwoods is completely
There
paved.
is
It's
a
further
curb
east.
behind
Oh,
the
at the
current
ball fields.
building, but not behind the new planned hard surface and fenced. So if you'll pull up the other map, please. This side on the right hand, or my right hand side, probably your left hand side, because you're probably looking at it opposite from me. The DC, that is a new hard surface fenced area that will change the drainage, and it is not curved. That is a field that they have regraded to make ball fields.
But to be clear again, on that southern boundary, at point D, that is surrounding point C, but that line right there, that is an existing 6-foot fence that it sounds like is
Owned by the
existing
homeowners.
by the homeowners. So there is a 6-foot wooden fence between
Owned by
those
the
places.
homeowners.
Okay, just want to make sure we're
So
all
that-
talking
that-
about the
that-
same thing.
That was
That is-
installed by the homeowners association?
It was by us personally. We own it personally. It is not home.
Each individual
do
homeowner
it
paid
per
to have
house.
that done? Because it's all the same.
That's what's
and
up.
it
Yes.
looks like it was all installed at the same time, and it's right on the property line.
No, actually, it's not all, like, my next door neighbor installed his a couple of years ago. We installed ours about 5 years ago, and the ball field is torn to crap. And Margie lives on the other side of me, and she installed hers about 3 years ago.
So this must be quite a bit east of the Atwoods, because
This
I
is
drove all
not-
the way
If
down
you
the Atwoods
go-
alley, and you
so
can't
what-
drive.
Yeah, if
over
you're looking at where the ball field is where the DNC is going. That is a ball field. Has no curb. It is not a hard surface.
They can pave that and have it drain to the north. That, again,
Yeah.
that's not a
Yeah.
problem for
And so
that.
we want a fence put in there at the curb level, so we don't have to look at that.
There's already a fence, though, so I think that's some
We
of the
own,
issue.
that we
Yeah, I
homeowners
don't
own.
know that who owns it matters. It matters that there is a 6-foot site-proof fence.
And
Well, if they own it, then I want it replaced.
But that we can talk about height as well. The drainage issue is sort of strange to me too, because clearly there was an issue and they put sumps in behind the Atwoods because
Yes.
probably so much water was spilling over onto the neighbors that they tried to do that. So I feel like there's some stuff we don't know here that's
there's a curb.
about the drainage.
There's a curb that goes.
There is a
all
curb behind the actual
Atwoods.
building,
Yeah, I
right?
think that's all east.
But it's a sump pump too, but they're still complaining, is there water behind the building or is it over where the ball
There's
field
water
is?
behind the building, and there's water in the field, the baseball fields. Okay,
So
there
even where
is-
the sump pumps are, it still floods?
Yes, ma'am. It's flooded right now. Flooded right now.
Because
I see it.
some pubs sometimes work for a while and then they don't,
They've
they're
been
not
there for
working.
a while,
on the-
yes.
Yeah, I
Okay.
went this morning. I didn't see any water.
Okay.
So the
but-
question of who owns the fence, I think,
Yeah, the pumps
is
are, the
oddly
pumps are where the
relevant
slab's going.
to some extent, because I think we are well within our purview to require the applicant to put up a site-proof fence, regardless of whether there's already
you
one
want
there that's owned
three
by somebody
fences right
else.
there?
Let's make sure that if we don't.
I'm just saying, I don't think it's irrelevant.
Well, commissioners, before we even go there, do we have any questions for Ms. Sawyer? We can let her sit back down.
Okay.
Anything with your remaining time?
I think what we're getting confused in the 3 fences, there are not 3 fences there. There is a fence that the ball field put up that is kind of haphazardly in the ball fields. There is a little bit of a fence behind the current building, but the piece we're talking about is where the new hard surface is going. There is not another fence there because I have a gate that opens into it.
Okay.
So that is
where we
not
are
where
here,
it is fenced by anybody other than the
There's the
homeowners.
building.
Okay.
We're over here somewhere.
But you have to understand, we're looking at the whole boundary of this spud, and
Yeah.
there's clearly a fence for the whole length of the Atwoods
Currently
building
owned by the homeowners. The
specifically.
stockade fences along that back edge of the property are owned by the homeowners. Each individual homeowner owns those fences.
Okay.
We have all installed them.
Well,
East of the Atwoods.
Then
Bill,
some
east
people
of the-
own, some people own 2 fences, because there's an 8-foot on their side and there's a 6-foot on the Atwood side, so
They've
they own
torn
both
down
of
They
those?
haven't torn down the old fence.
Okay.
The newer
Okay.
fences are what the
I'd
homeowners.
say the business was there first, so they built their fence first behind the building, and then the residents came in, and if they wanted the
Right.
nice side of the fence facing them, they'd put in another fence sandwiched
Right.
to it.
That's a different statement than what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
Right, that's what I was trying to clarify.
But where they are proposing the new hard surface and the fenced-in area, there is no fence other than the one I own, the one my other neighbor owns, and the one Margie.
Right. I just
Okay.
think that the requirement is a 6-foot site-proof fence between the C3, 6 to 8. between
That's
Yeah,
in addition to what they're proposing around that area?
No, I just think that
Or are we
well,
just saying?
commissioners, before,
on the property line.
let's
along
be
the
clear.
entire
I want to make sure that, so Ms. Sawyer, anything else before we let you have your seat?
No, I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same piece of land. I mean, the building exists where it's white. There is 2 fences there. One, they're all owned by the homeowners. There is my fence, my neighbors are fence, where you're proposing the D and C, okay, the new hard surface and the fenced yard. There is one fence. It belongs to the homeowners.
Okay. Where
Okay.
D and C are,
Where
there is
D
a
and
wooden
C are,
6-foot
that belongs
fence.
to the homeowners.
Okay, okay.
All the big fence, all the 6-foot fence along the back of that property belong to those homeowners.
Okay.
There's several of us here that live on that road. There's several of us.
Okay. All right, thank you, Marty, and sorry, we kept you here for to get the full answer, but at least you got your time to explain so we can have a common understanding. Okay, before we hear from Barry, which everyone's, the much anticipated, excuse me, opportunity to hear from Barry, can we hear from staff about the screening requirement between when C3 is located next to R1?
Sarah Welch, Planning Department. Really, any non-residential zoning, including C3, requires site-proof screening, so between a 6 and 8-foot fence and a 5-foot landscape buffer when adjoining or when abutting residential. And then outdoor screening areas also are required to be screened, so they're not visible from any adjoining property. And then one thing that I wanted to add also is that, just for the neighbor's benefit, is nothing can be stacked above that fence either.
That's helpful. Okay, Sarah, so, excuse me, there is a screening requirement. That obligation is on the property owner, correct?
On the commercial developer.
The commercial developer.
Yes.
So what is in dispute is, what's not in dispute is there's a 6-foot fence that is along this property line. What is in dispute is whose fence it is. So in this, how does the city go about resolving this issue? I mean,
There shouldn't be
okay, so how does but again, the requirement, the onus of the requirement is on the property owner. So I want to hear about the city's review of that requirement.
I don't think I could answer that right here and now. I would say if there wasn't a fence, the commercial developer is the one responsible for putting it up.
So maybe I can make this real quick and easy. Where the uniform fence stops, which absolutely we own, we can extend that for the length of the property. Now, when you look at Street View, what you'll see is the neighbors have installed gates to be able to access this property. So we will be blocking their pedestrian access moving forward with this new fence that we will extend to the east.
I'm going to turn to the municipal counselor's office for this. It sounds like the ownership, and I understand neighbors have an opinion, have a view. I am not disagreeing with that view. I am asking objectively for information because my obligation is to our city and to all of our residents. And so I'm trying to, including the applicant, and so I'm trying to make sure that I understand what our legal obligations and requirements are. And so the applicant is saying that they own this fence. The property owners, adjacent property owners, say that they do. How should we be taking those facts into consideration when we're making our decision about this screening requirement?
I can tell you who owns them, just by.
Go ahead. You guys can talk all you want.
The ones past Atwoods, the 6-foot fence, are all homeowners, obviously. The ones behind Atwood's fence, which is theirs, are the ones that homeowners put in, and those are their fences. And I don't get.
So,
But
yeah.
Atwoods has a fence.
There's two yeah.
Correct.
And there's areas where they're sandwiched with two
It's
fences.
illogical to
facing-
think that the neighbors own two sets of fences right there.
No, they just
right?
own their one they put in.
Atwoods, or the current property owner, installed the current fence, stop, to that.
To there.
To the east of that are the homeowners' fences. What I'm saying is, we will agree to extend the uniform fence that's there, stopping there, to the east, thereby blocking the pedestrian access that they installed themselves. That's fine.
Okay, so,
If that's
so
what they
now,
desire.
I appreciate that. So then my question for our attorney is, help us understand how we should analyze this issue. It's in dispute. The property owners, it sounds like, are saying, no, we own the fence that's directly behind Atwoods. It sounds like it's not in dispute that they don't own the fence to the east of that point that Mr. Box just outlined.
If there is some sort of dispute, I'm not sold that there is as far as that part. However, if there is, that would be up for code enforcement, or it's a civil matter between the parties. I don't think it's necessarily something for you all necessarily to figure out. As Sarah pointed out, if you have a fencing requirement, that is on the property owner, and that is what would be enforced by code enforcement, is the fencing requirement being met.
Gotcha.
So if, okay.
It's
So
there,
if we simply reiterate here that the applicant has the obligation to install a site-proof fence from, what street is this?
It sounds like they already have an obligation to do
well,
that.
No, I'm just saying, if we reiterate that
Okay.
obligation, then from Bryant East, then if they've already done part of it, great, and they'll do the rest.
So what I want to know is, if it exists, are they still obligated? Because if that was a blocked bricked wall all the way across there, owned by the HOA or owned up by the individual homeowners, would we still be making the property development put up another fence?
I believe so, in
See,
terms of
I don't think
of
so.
the,
I think it meets code because it exists.
not if it's not, I don't think so. I think the obligation is on the developer. So if
I agree with the obligation, but if it exists.
But their obligation is met, and we just had this, even our last planning commission case, when you have a commercial development and there's an existing fence there, their obligation is met.
Personally, I'd be trying to get the existing fence replaced and new, and then bang, be done.
Well, that's what I heard one of the citizens that spoke up is saying, we want the developer to put in their fence, so we're not,
But
it's
at
not our
an
fence.
at 8 feet, though, I think is what the caveat.
Well, that was another
is there.
point made.
Yeah.
Just to throw one other thing out there, is we're talking about drainage, and there's clearly a low point behind this building somewhere. This site's higher than the houses behind it, so water follows a natural path. That's why they put a sump in, and they're pumping that water to get it over to the street.
Obviously,
We could make another comment, which was just started to be discussed, which is addressing that the south boundary of area C and D can't drain over into their yards, by whether that's suggesting that it's curbed or it's graded so that no drain, I don't know, but I feel like that needed to be addressed.
But how's that any different than what the code already requires, which it sounds like it's time for us to hear from Barry?
Yeah, maybe that's right.
before we do.
Obviously, the grading
Before
on the
we do
site
hear
was
from
off
Barry,
to begin with.
Sarah, help me out here on the issue of, if there were a brick wall there that were owned by the homeowners association, would that alleviate the developer's obligation to provide site-proof fencing?
I think we have done that as long as the wall meets the height requirement of the C3's districts.
So if it's not a wall, there's a fence, but
yeah.
if there's a fence there that's existing, no matter who owns it, it satisfies the requirement.
We think that does satisfy, yes. And should the fence ever come down, then the commercial developer is responsible for putting it back up.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, that seems commonsensical, so.
It does, because it would be redundant, but I guess unless there's a difference in height. Hi, Barry. Did you enjoy our discussion so far?
I've been following, listening to everything you've said.
Okay. Well, help us out first with the sump pumps and the issue of the people who live directly behind this current building.
So, as far as sump pumps are concerned, those are all private structures, and we, as a city, would not have anything to do with those at all.
So if we were solving this problem as a city, we would have dealt with it by grading and that kind of thing, rather than
Proper
requiring
grading, yeah.
installation of sump pumps.
Right, 'cause I will say, sump pumps for dealing with drainage are extremely inefficient and very expensive. You just can't deal with what I think about with a sump pump is a half horsepower, 1 horsepower basement pump that's gonna drain a little bit of groundwater. The amount of water we're talking coming off here, those sump pumps will be completely ineffective. They're gonna be overwhelmed with the smallest rainfall. So back up a little bit here too and go back to one of the earlier statements with our previous case. When we come to look at the drainage from the Public Works standpoint, City of Oklahoma City standpoint, we can only enforce what is in the drainage ordinance. So the first thing I want to say with this is that the water that's currently running off of that site that has been following that same pathway since that shopping center was built, however many years ago that was, we cannot impose a restriction on Atwoods to correct that. Now, they may voluntarily do that, they may choose to do that, but as far as our requirements from our drainage ordinance, we cannot require them to go in and correct what has been occurring.
So we missed that chance?
Excuse me?
We missed that chance
Yeah, when they
with the
reviewed the
first
grading
round of development?
The development to the south.
Well, yeah, probably, but I will say, I won't say we missed the chance.
I mean,
It's
we
very
can't
likely that the drainage ordinance that was in effect at the time that development was done may have been different than it is now. And so it would have been a different enforcement. I don't know that for a fact, but that is a possibility. The other possibility is with that depending on what that ordinance said, there may not have been a requirement to provide any detention, which I'm assuming there wasn't since there's none here. And with that, the historic drainage patterns can be followed. And from my review of just our city contours, haven't looked at any kind of a detailed survey with this, the typical natural drainage path from this site it's very flat, but it's roughly from northeast to southwest. So the natural drainage pattern does take this flow from the potential Atwood site across that residential development. And just based on what I've seen on the historic contours, that's where it's always gone. They are allowed to maintain that historic pattern. Now, that said as well, again, this site is not within the detention required boundary. So from the drainage ordinance stance, I can't go to the developer and say, you have to provide detention for this additional hard surface area, with one caveat: if that combined D and C area is greater than 2 acres, which I don't think it is, and looking at this, I really don't know. If it is, then that would require detention to be provided for that site. We won't know that until building permit plans are submitted for that parking area. One thing I would point out, with our authority being limited to the drainage ordinance, the PUD does have the statement in it that the development will comply with Chapter 16 of the municipal code. So they are obligating themselves to comply with those requirements. All of that said too, if I'm looking at this from a strictly engineering standpoint, I would probably, as I don't remember which one of the commissioners had stated it, it'd be advisable to try to grade this site so that it goes away from those property owners. Now that's what I would look at from the engineering standpoint, but we will not be reviewing any grading plans unless this falls under that 2-acre commercial development requirement. Public Works will not review a grading plan for this. The only thing that will happen is that when it goes in for the building permit for that hard surface area, they will send that to us for a detention requirement. And if it does not get up to that 2-acre threshold, then we won't require that, and we will do no further review of the building permit drawings.
So if I'm a neighbor who the drainage gets, the flooding issues gets worse, and I am directly behind the hard surface C and D, and now now that that's been built, the water has risen significantly. What's my recourse? Do I call the city? Do I sue the applicant? Do I sue the owner of Atwoods? What am I supposed to do?
So I will defer a little bit to our municipal counselor, but again, from the engineering standpoint, and this is not a legal opinion of any kind, from our standpoint, the recourse of the property owners, the homeowners, would be to file suit against the property owner to the north.
So that exceeds the city's enforcement capability within the existing ordinance?
Yes, we have no enforcement authority or design jurisdiction beyond what our ordinance requires.
Okay, so now let's go back to the building permit to create hard surface C and, or it sounds like, yeah, the fenced-in area, so C and D. That again can be constructed regardless of whether this application is approved or not. What you will do is you will review it for detention and the necessity of detention, correct? Otherwise, they're obligated to follow the city's drainage ordinance, and they essentially can't make it worse than what it currently is, the historic pattern, right?
So you are,
If it's-
you're, I'll say partially correct with
Okay.
that. We don't have, other than if it falls within our detention required boundary, we don't have a specific statement in our ordinance that says they can't make the runoff worse. And Stephen can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe there are provisions within state water law that would keep them from doing some type of development that would harm another property. But again, that falls outside of the authority of the city to enforce.
Let's go to the municipal counselor.
I wish I could be a water law expert. But I would agree with Barry, in the event, and I don't know if there is or is not some sort of state law requirement on this. I think it would largely be a civil matter, and I would agree that it would likely fall outside of your scope here. I think as long as they're complying with the drainage regulations, you're in good shape.
Okay.
The tough part of that is the natural pattern is northeast to southwest, so that would be the case that says there's nothing.
Yeah, if it was the
Atwoods has to
opposite,
do.
if it was the opposite and they were making it come this way in their new construction, there would be a case, but naturally it falls this way.
Mm-hmm.
And unless they want to be a good neighbor and try to change that or correct that, they have the right to allow the natural drainage that's been that way.
About drainage? Okay, I think we've heard several things. The largest concern, number one, I think it's very important, and I know that this is difficult for neighbors to hear, but truly, what is at issue currently is whether or not we want to allow them to do the seasonal displays, which are the points labeled A on the map. If we were to say no, if we were to just say no, recommend the city council say no, they can go build an Atwoods, they can go function as an Atwoods, they can go build that hard surfaces D, and they would, the only obligation that they would have is to build this additional fence that would be in front of D. That would be what would be required. So I think that's the main issue is, are we going to allow that or are we not going to allow it? As far as any additional requirements, because this is a PUD, it's specialized zoning, and I think this is what the neighbors are asking for in general is, okay, well, what additional concessions can we get as a result of the fact that this is a PUD? Some of those have been answered. Number one, We requested that we get rid of the amplified sound, which they've agreed to do. We asked about the lighting, which again, the lighting's gonna have to meet the code, so that requires the directional lighting. So there's one thing with the lighting. Then the issue in dispute is about the screening. So the screening, I'm getting to everything, I hope. Screening is another issue. So there is the dispute about whether an additional fence is required. Neighbors are asking for an additional fence, that they are saying that their fence is, that the existing fence is owned by the property owners, the residential property owners, versus the commercial property owner. What I asked of the city's staff and of the municipal councilor was, okay, so that's in dispute. The commercial property owner says they own the fence. The neighbors say they own the fence. What are we supposed to do? And the response that we received was, code enforcement has to make that decision. Because if code enforcement discovers that it is in fact the fence of the commercial property owner, they've met their obligation. They've met their legally required obligation, right? Sarah's frowning, so come up and correct what I'm saying. So then the final issue, and maybe most important issue, is about the drainage. And it sounds like, based on Barry's statement, they're going to be required to meet the historic, the drainage as it's been historically existing. And so I don't know what additional requirements we can make that aren't already existing in ordinance to address that issue. Because again, they can occupy this place as an Atwoods tomorrow, regardless of whether we approve this zoning or not. So I'm just wanting to understand that. So I guess Sarah and Barry, help me straighten out what I said that was incorrect.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. I don't think that when code enforcement goes out to the property, they would survey it or determine whose fence it is. I think they would just look to make sure that the property is screened, that the fence is the correct height, that it's the correct material, and that it's not in poor condition.
Yeah, they're not gonna decide who owns it.
Okay.
That part would be a simple matter.
That would be the part that's, okay. So even if we were to, so let's say we required, which I think what neighbors are asking for is we'll require them to build another fence. Okay, well, they already are required to build the fence, correct? Yes, they are, because it's C3 next to R1.
The property is required to be screened.
Okay.
So I think what's under, so if the current fence meets the condition.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we wouldn't probably find that to be a code violation under the existing zoning. If the PUD is modified to require a specific height or type of fence along that property line, then the commercial property owner would probably be replacing those fences if they didn't meet what you all approved.
Okay, so if this, again, the existing ordinance is that the screening, so that I'm saying the right thing, Commissioner Privet, the screening is a 6 to 8 foot opaque fence.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the requirement.
That's the requirement.
In C3. I believe, and I'm going from memory, I think the way the PUD is worded is that the existing, until they modify it, the existing fencing is deemed to conform, and then if a new structure is built, then they'll meet the code. And then they have, except that they have special materials, which I noted that metal is not one of them. Normally, metal is allowed in C3. They have removed that as a material should they have to put up a new fence. So,
Okay, okay.
Really, just to play devil's advocate here, what we could do is require that in the event the screening is removed or damaged or whatever, the applicant is required to replace it with an 8-foot opaque fence. I would not ever, the lawyer me would not ever advise somebody to do this. But if these people own these fences and they want to take them down, they're certainly entitled to do that, at which point it would be up to the applicant to put up an 8-foot fence.
Okay. We can certainly hear from the applicant about that, too. Okay.
So bouncing back around to the drainage part of it one more time, since we are in as a zoning case, my understanding is we can't impose any additional restrictions drainage-wise other than what is contained within Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code, which they have in their PUD document have agreed to comply with. So maybe that directs a little bit, and I just say that just to maybe clarify
Yes.
the statement a minute
That
ago
does
about
clarify.
the runoff.
It doesn't make neighbors happy. It
No, it's
certainly
not gonna
doesn't
make
do
anybody
that.
happy.
They're certainly very upset about it, and I hear them in being very upset about the current situation with the drainage. So,
Commissioner Powers was going somewhere that my mind had too, is go take your fence down real quick so you get a new one. I get that, but we're not saying anyone should do that.
No.
I also think it's an unfair burden to put on the individual that, yeah, as long as your fence, until your fence deteriorates, and then when it needs replacing, what are they gonna go knock on the door at Atwoods and say, hey, will you replace my fence, because I know you have to have one? I mean, yeah, in theory, that's what they would have to do. Is that fair?
Atwoods would probably agree with the homeowners to replace the fence and, split the cost. I mean.
Well, no, it wouldn't be split, it wouldn't split the cost. No, they would be paying for all of that fence, Atwoods, not the homeowners at all.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I mean, is that, if that's what we're saying, okay, then maybe that's okay, but I'm just pointing that out. But I do think because of some of the other issues that were mentioned, and maybe we don't have anything legally on the drainage issue, however, what we do have is holding concrete off of the fence line. So the proposed Area D is a proposed new concrete right on the fence line. I heard a comment from the public that was asking for a potential separation for landscaping and potential tree buffer. So I'm not suggesting that we change the condition that exists behind the building, because I know that's required for fire circulation and lots of other reasons it's existing. But the section that is new concrete, we could limit that and hold that off of the
That's true.
fence. And that would also help
That's true.
with the, potentially the drainage, because at least it's not impervious right against their fence.
that's a good point. That's a very good point.
And there is that, it's not only screening, it's the 5-foot buffer, there is that requirement.
Yeah. The existing 5-foot buffer would be required. That's a good point. It does. I think it helps.
It also, I think, would help, I mean, I don't know very much about fence installation, but don't they sometimes put them on curbs? They build a curb and put the fence into that footing, sort of?
And I thought about that too, and that could make sense, because at least it keeps less of that, at least it keeps the water flowing out to the already paved surface. Now, that might make the problem worse for the first person past the curb behind the Atwoods building. So I was a little, we're not looking at a grading plan, or Commissioner Clare would have it all figured out for us right now.
But certainly where they know they're going to have to install new fencing around the D and C and that way, that could be done there.
It could be. Okay. We need to know, we need to hear from the applicant. We need to hear their commitments, and we need to document those commitments so that we can prepare ourselves for whatever recommendation we're making to the city council.
I feel like I'm at the HP commission, all this talk of fencing. So, our commitment is, can I see that? So, where the fence stops, which is about right here, we will construct a new 6-foot fence, stockade, side-proof, that mirrors what's there now, thereby blocking the access points that the neighbors have installed themselves, if that's what they so desire. Everything else we've committed to. We commit to Chapter 16. We're going to meet the drainage ordinance. Like, I don't know what else do you desire from us?
The landscape buffer, which it sounds like is already required.
The 5-foot buffer is already required, right, by C3?
On the east. And we're not touching, we're not going to rip out the concrete.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I do think it's within our purview, since we're doing this into a PUD, to require an 8-foot fence instead of a 6-foot. But, I think that's a very limited victory,
knowing about the existing drainage issues that are there, I think that we should have a minimum 5-foot landscape buffer on the south boundary of the property for any new impervious surface. Should be held off that fence line. I think you have to anyway. And if that's already required, apologize, but
Right.
it is, you're saying.
It's already drafted that way.
And for me, I don't think I would make the applicant take out the fence behind the Atwoods to make it an 8-footer. It's only 6 right now. And so if they were willing to go 8 foot past that point, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, I don't think I would be in favor of requiring, if we even could, them to remove the fence that's there. If at some point it has to be replaced in the future, it would be better to be an 8-foot fence. And if we can make that requirement as part of the PUD, then I'm all in favor of it.
So we can agree to put an 8-foot stockade from the point where the cursor is, keep going, stop. They're there. Which is the point where we're adding something that doesn't currently exist.
Okay.
That's good.
But we're not, it's illogical to rip out a perfectly good 6-foot fence that exists behind there now. It's in good shape. Frankly, there's a lot of electrical and other things like that are attached to it that operate the sump pumps. There's other fences on the south side of that. Some neighbors have installed their own fence. So we're not in favor of ripping out a perfectly good fence when the neighbors are, again, lower anyway. So although it's 6 feet, it really has the impact of a taller fence because they are lower.
I agree.
So where are we, commissioners? Let's hear a motion that impacts all of these issues, and I'm in agreement with Commissioner Powers that, you know, if in the event that there's new construction, you know, then we want to require them to have to build, you know, an 8-foot fence. And I don't know how we can put the wording in regarding this new area of additional fencing that the applicant's agreeing to.
You can just say that, as indicated on Exhibit B, the span of D that is unpaved shall be required to be an 8-foot site-proof fence.
Or new area east of existing paving.
Yeah, contained within D of Exhibit B.
Okay.
I don't think I can say it again. So perfectly worded. And then we do need to add the TE that the addition of the architectural element does not qualify as a new structure.
Okay.
And the amplified sound.
The amplified sound.
Removing exterior amplified sound.
Okay. Sarah?
Can I please try to read the TE to see if you agree?
Yes.
Okay. Exterior amplified sound is not permitted on the premises. Okay. Replace the second sentence of section 9.4 with, a new 8-foot fence shall be required along the south property line where one does not exist. And how about to the extent of the developed area? That is a defined,
Well, but it's not there yet, right?
no, but when they
Where
come into
the
permit
applicant's
to
fence
establish
doesn't
the outdoor
exist?
storage, that will become the developed area.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Is the Atwoods
Proposed
store itself not
development
developed area?
area.
Yeah, as long as we're talking about
Or to the extent.
Proposed improvements.
Okay, but my question as staff is, in the event, this isn't, in the event in the future that the PUD extends farther east, so as if and when that should ever develop, shouldn't the fence also extend?
Right.
Okay. And then it says the said wall, and I would think we should say it said fence or wall.
agreed.
Okay.
So what about the 8-foot fence replacement in the event that the existing 6-foot fence has to be replaced?
We won't be replacing it. We'll be replacing like the slats. It's in steel poles, so no.
I
Oh,
agree, it's a can of worms, it's a liability, dogs, utilities.
But
Putting
she's
that-
saying in the event that it's destroyed or damaged?
well, yes, we were told that in the event that anything happens to the existing fence,
Yeah.
it's the applicant's obligation right now to replace it.
Yeah, that already
I'm
is.
just saying
For
if they
their fee,
replace it,
yeah.
replace with an 8-foot.
We're going to stick with 6-foot.
outside the ordinance's capability.
Perhaps it's worth pointing out that, again, the only thing we're asking for is the ability to move the stuff further away from the neighbors. I'd like to just put that out there again.
Well, I've heard that a number of times, but actually a big paved surface of C and D is also what you're asking for.
No.
No.
You're saying you can already do that?
No, they can do that regardless.
We could go
Okay,
build a
okay,
new
okay.
strip center right there today with, or we could just make it all parking. Just a big old slab of concrete for fun.
Yes, they do not need this application to build D or C. I want to be very clear about that.
Yeah, just outdoor storage.
We're showing you what we're doing, but it's zone C3 right now.
And just so I'm clear, one more time then, the proposed hard surface paving shown in D that surrounds C cannot be any closer than 5 feet from that property line as the current rules are written.
Correct.
Okay,
5 foot.
we don't need any TE for that. You have
No,
at
that's
least
what
that
the-
buffer.
correct.
Okay.
It's already required. And that includes the landscaping within, right?
So the current zoning,
setback.
not the current situation, but the current zoning C3 would require a 15-foot setback with a 5-foot landscape buffer, and you are allowed to pave your setback.
Oh,
Except for the landscape buffer, obviously. So
Except for the
it has to be a
landscape buffer.
5 foot.
Okay.
And is that carried into the PUD?
I'm sorry?
Is
Is
that
that la-
carried into the PUD?
The PUD currently as drafted says that the existing landscaping stays. In
Okay.
the event of a new structure, it'll meet code, correct?
which would require, again, that the 5 feet remain.
A 5-foot landscape buffer.
Right. Okay.
There's other options, but that's the one that would work on this site.
So before we vote, I'm very sorry. I know that our neighbors will not be happy with this result, I'm feeling, and I apologize for that. I hope that you heard and understand that the reason why we had this extended conversation was so that we could all gain a mutual understanding of what the Planning Commission could require above and beyond what the city ordinances already require with regard to the drainage. So we heard from Barry Lodge, an expert from Public Works, tell us they have to adhere to the city's standards and obligations that are in ordinances already. We cannot require above and beyond what those ordinances already require. Then you heard about the screening. We asked for new screening. I understand that it's in dispute which screening is owned by the property owner versus what screening is owned by the residences. But as far as the new areas are concerned, where there could be new hard surface, there's going to be a landscape buffer requirement. There's going to be a fencing, an additional 8-foot fence that's going to be constructed along those same areas. There's no longer going to be allowed amplified sound, which, by the way, if Atwoods moved in today or tomorrow, they could have that, but they will no longer do that. And they'll also have to comply with the lighting ordinance that already requires that it be redirected. Furthermore, by recommending approval of this zoning, it moves the displays further away from the neighbors. Currently, they would not be allowed to do that. And so I know it's not a win. I never feel good about these cases where it turns out that it's just a really complicated issue. And so I apologize for that. But I do think that the concessions that we were able to get are good things that will be beneficial for the neighbors in the long run. You certainly have me as an advocate for figuring out how we can improve the drainage ordinance so that there's more protections for existing property owners, and I'm happy to support that. I am not a hydrologist. I'm barely an attorney, it feels like, when I'm up here, but I'm certainly committed to that. So with that, I think we're just looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take a shot at this and move to recommend approval to City Council PUD 2018, subject to new technical evaluations. 1, the addition of architectural elements does not constitute a new building. And that's related to the signage in the front facade. 2, exterior amplified sound shall not be permitted. And 3, new 8-fence opaque fencing shall be installed on the southern property line east of the existing structure for the length of the new paving improvements.
Do we say east of
Right.
developed area
Yeah, to the.
instead of structure?
The extent of the developed area, right?
Okay.
Does that match what you had, Sarah? Can you read what you had?
I had that a new 8-foot opaque fence shall be required along the south property line where one does not exist to the extent of the developed area.
Okay. Does that work for you?
That's fine.
Okay.
The extent where it doesn't exist, I think my fear is that to the extent where it doesn't exist, an 8-foot fence doesn't exist anywhere right now. So east of the developed area is a clear line of demarcation.
Okay. Does that make sense in the way you have it written?
How about east of the existing building?
But not building, because the paved area, it's east of the developed.
Goes east there a
So if
little
you
bit.
say building.
How about you
like,
give us an exhibit
we can do it
to
for
amend
sure.
and send to council showing where you're going to put the fence?
Perfect. That's much easier.
So how does that TE need to read for us to make this motion?
Per the exhibit provided by the applicant.
An exhibit will be provided showing the fencing as presented to the planning commission, that a fence will be provided east of the existing fencing. And I would expect it to go with, we're gonna get into something else here. I would expect it, I think screening should be required per code wherever they develop, however far east they go.
For sure.
Okay.
Right.
Anything different.
That's, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah.
I just want to make clear that we're not touching our existing fence that ends at that paved area. Is my
Okay.
point.
Anything else on the TEs? Okay, so it's about as clear as mud. Did staff understand where we are with those TEs that Commissioner Claire read?
Crystal clear.
Oh, crystal clear, according to the planning director. Oh, that's comforting. Okay. Commissioner Claire moves to recommend to City Council approval of PUD 2018, subject to the technical evaluations as read into the record. That motion is seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. And I would again encourage our neighbors, this application will go on to the City Council in about 6 weeks, so you'll have the opportunity to share your concerns with the council. Okay, this concludes the separate items to be heard. We're now on to additional items. There are no additional items. We're now on to communications and reports and planning commission committees. I'm prepared to report on the ADU committee, unless there's other committee reports. You all will recall that the ADU ordinance was proposed at our last meeting, that we had a pretty intense discussion. A committee was formed consisting of me, Commissioner Govine, Commissioner Noble, and Commissioner Powers. That committee had a great meeting with staff. This past week, my days are getting confused. In that meeting, we decided that we would certainly take into serious consideration the proposed ordinance around home sharing or Airbnbs. And so we've decided to move forward with holding a series of meetings where we would invite stakeholders to visit with the committee. So we aren't actually expanding the committee beyond planning commission members. We will be the committee. But we will invite experts and stakeholders to come visit with us and share their thoughts as we form a version of the ordinance to come back for our review as a full planning commission. We will hear from stakeholders in historic preservation and historic landmark overlay areas first. Then we will hear from other neighborhood associations. Then we will hear from realtors and other property owners that are very strongly pro-ADU. The goal will be to hear from those stakeholders, make amendments to the ordinance, and then hear from those stakeholders in some form again, so that they can have the opportunity to weigh in on what we've decided based on hearing all the feedback, and then bring something back to the Planning Commission for its further review. I suspect that this will take some time. So unless the Planning Commission or our staff are in a hurry, that's the pattern the plan we'd like to follow. Any additions from members?
No, I just would say that, as we saw today, there's still a path for them to get ADUs. So it's not like we're stopping ADUs from being built. There's still a pathway. It's just the time to get the ordinance completed right is probably most important.
I agree. And if you have, and I appreciate, Commissioner Newman sent me an email with details as well about the ADU ordinance, so I apologize because I don't think I responded, but I did read it thoroughly. But I think that this is a good opportunity for us to hear. So for anybody who's listening to the Planning Commission and you are interested in participating in the process, feel free to reach out to staff and they'll let us know that you'd like to be included in that group of stakeholders as we're going out and visiting with people. But I think this will be a good process for us to move forward. So.
I did want to note, I did notice in the city of OKC, my water bill came. There was the little news sheet that came this month, also mentioned the ADU, that this is all being discussed, that there's meetings, provided information for the public to engage with that process.
That's great.
Good job, city.
All right. Any other Planning Commission committees? Then we'll hear from Planning Commission members. Commissioner Clare.
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Powers. Commissioner Meek. Commissioner Privet.
Yes.
Anything?
No.
Commissioner Newman.
Nothing.
Commissioner Govine.
Nope.
Commissioner Noble. My only comment is thank you for allowing me to serve these last 2 years as the chair of the commission. It has been a joy. It has been an extreme challenge, as you have seen over the last few months, but it has been a joy. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I am very excited because I think we will do even better with the, it is a significant upgrade for us to move to our next chairman. So thank you for giving me that opportunity. Planning Department.
The only thing I had is just relating to those two ordinances that were mentioned, accessory dwellings and home sharing. There was talk in the pre-meeting about potentially doing a study session / development review committee. So if that's the desire of the commission, I think it would be desirable to have that before at least the home sharing comes before the commission on the 25th. So we will look for a time that will accommodate. Of course, there's no planning commission meeting between now and then, so we'll accommodate. We'll send maybe a poll or something out for you all to tell us what dates would work for you. But we will at least have the home sharing agenda or ordinance on there, and possibly the accessory dwellings as well, just so that the committee can report out and can kind of discuss what's been going on. And there might be another item or two, but those would be the main thing. So with summer calendars and so on, it may be that's well, we'll send out a poll. But yeah, it may be a little tricky. So that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you. And it was important to me that there be study sessions because all of us these are too important. The issues are just way too important for us not to all have the opportunity to be present. So the study session, I think, is really important. Municipal Counselor's Office, you were working overtime today. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Citizens to be heard, we have none. Now we are in line to have an election of officers, and we're looking at this point for nominations for chair.
Well, I would nominate Commissioner Clare. He's been serving as our vice chair, and I think he's more than up to the task.
Completely agree. I wholeheartedly support that nomination.
Are you willing
Second
to
that.
So the motion is to nominate Commissioner Clare as the new Planning Commission chairman. That's been seconded by Commissioner Noble. I think, do we need a voice vote? No, we got it. Okay.
You got it. 21st century. I don't. Oh, you logged out.
Let's see. Okay, so again, the motion is to elect Commissioner Clare as our new chairman. That motion's been made by Commissioner Powers and seconded by Commissioner Noble. Please cast your votes. Did you already log out, Commissioner Meek? He's already ready to be, he's already done. Commissioner Meek votes, yeah. Oh, you didn't vote for yourself?
No.
Oh my God, okay.
But
It's still unanimous. It's still a unanimous vote.
Thank you all for your confidence, and I look forward to serving with you. And I do want to take opportunity to thank you, Chairman Pennington, for your excellent leadership. You've set a great example and a high bar, so.
Here,
Appreciate it.
here.
Appreciate it. Well, let's nominate a vice chair.
If he's willing to serve, I would nominate Don Noble.
I just don't think Don has enough jobs.
I think that's true.
And that's my complaint. He just won't serve. I mean, he's only our, Board of Adjustment on all the committees, on everything. And so, yeah, he would be an excellent choice.
That's why he did such a good job.
Right.
And
He's everywhere.
And I would second that.
So the motion is to, assuming he accepts that nomination, the motion is to elect Don Noble as our vice chair. We better go ahead and vote quickly, it sounds like.
Before he thinks about it.
The motion's been made by Commissioner Powers, seconded by Commissioner Clare. Please cast your votes. Commissioner Meek votes yes. And the motion passes, and Commissioner Noble also didn't vote for himself, but congratulations and good luck. So we have reached the end of our agenda, thankfully, and we're adjourned.